Hey guys! This is part 6 of What If Naruto Was an Otsutsuki. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start! Chapter 16. Standing a good distance away from the walls of Konoha, out of sight of the gate guards that he knew would be posted outside, Naruto was reminded of just how little time affected him compared to the rest of the world. Mountains would rise and fall, lakes would expand and dry up, people would be born and die, and in all that time, he would remain the same, unchanging. This is something that he had accepted long ago, yet, at the same time, he hadn't gotten over it. How could one truly move past the fact that they would be the one to bury their children? Or their children's children? Naruto had learned that he would never be able to move past this, that it would always haunt him, but he had learned to simply accept it. What else could he do? Dwell on it until it consumed him. As he looked at the walls that had protected Konoha from over 50 years, Naruto couldn't help but wonder when if he would have to possibly bury his son twice. Should this Minato Namikaze truly be his son, how long would he have with him before Minato died? A shinobi life was dangerous, and considering that he heard that this Minato was the Kage of Konoha, how long before he misjudged a punch, didn't leap far enough, slipped on rock? Naruto shook his head. He couldn't think like that, not when there was the possibility of his son still being alive. Such morbid thoughts should wait for a different time. Beginning the slow trek that would be typical of his current disguise, Naruto moved forward, towards the open gates. As he walked, Naruto had to admit that the clothes he was wearing were more comfortable than he had first thought. His usual black, loose-fitting pants were absent. In its place was a pair of similar-looking brown pants made of cotton. Where he would usually wear the Magatama kimono that the Yoso Sennin was known for, Naruto instead wore a brown haori with an undershirt of a similar color. All in all, it was quite plain to look at, the brown color only broken up by the parts of Naruto that were visible from the clothes openings. It made him look plain, unassuming. The perfect way to look, tying in well with the genjutsu that he covered his face and hair with, a genjutsu that made him look older than he actually was. His hair was black with gray roots showing instead of its usual pure white. Wrinkles adorned his usually flawless skin, while his pure white eyes were a startling green. The figure that was walking towards Konoha looked almost completely different from the one that had defended Uzushiogakure several years ago. As he moved to the gates, Naruto had to momentarily pause for a moment, wondering if he wasn't the only one that stopped aging. Before him were the exact same gate guards that he had seen when he first returned to Konoha to train Tsunade and her little friends. But it was as he stared at them that Naruto began to notice several differences between the two people before him and the ones that had guarded the gates several years ago. The differences in clothing, along with several other features, told Naruto that they were most likely the sons of the two that had met him originally. These two were also taking their jobs much more seriously than the other two had been. Both were alert and constantly scanning the area for any sudden movement. Though whether this was because the Third Shinobi War, as the people were calling it, had just finished or if they actually took their duties seriously remained to be seen. As he approached the gates, he noticed the two shinobi share a look as he approached, and noticed the cautious looks on their faces. When it came to shinobi, one was never too old to be a threat. It made sense that these two would be weary of him even though he looked well past his prime. The look quickly ended and the shinobi on his left, the one who wore his forehead protector like a bandana, approached the disguised Naruto. The ageless man noted that the shinobi kept a hand over the kunai pouch on his right leg. "Greetings, citizen, how may Konoha help you today?" The man tried to keep his voice bright and cheerful, but Naruto could sense the suspicion that the man had for him, which Naruto couldn't fault. Even when he constantly suppressed himself as much as he could, Naruto just seemed to emit an aura that spoke of strength. Many times it wasn't noticeable, but if one was trained extensively in the chakra arts, they were able to sense it. The aura wasn't very strong, hence why people like Tobirama or Hashirama wouldn't have reacted to it, but to those who were only just able to sense it, like he could guess the two before him could, it would have been a bit intimidating. "Hello?" Naruto greeted with a smile. "My name is Naruto. I am a humble traveler here to visit Konoha. I do not mean you, nor your beautiful village, any harm." Naruto had pondered on his way to the village hidden in the leaf if he should make up a reason for going to the village, or simply tell them that the real reason, that he had heard his son was alive when he had previously thought him dead. Naruto had eventually decided that it would be easier and more believable if he made up a reason, less of a chance of him getting labeled as insane and thrown in a cell. For a moment, Naruto had thought he had laid on the compliments a bit too thickly. The shinobi narrowed his eyes and scrutinized Naruto, looking him up and down. Acting was never something that Naruto took a particular shine to. He could spot a lie, tell a lie, but acting was out of his league. For what seemed like an eternity, the shinobi stared at Naruto before holding his hand out. "Papers?" he asked, before Naruto handed over the appropriate papers that he had created in a town several kilometers away when he realized he would need them to prove he was who he said he was. It took a bit of convincing to get the owner of the shop to make him the papers he required without having them beforehand. The shinobi looked over the papers, his eyes roaming over the pages, checking for any inconsistency that might be shown, while keeping half an eye on Naruto. "Very well, Naruto-san," the man said, handing the papers back over to the elderly-looking man. "Your papers seem to be correct. I hope you have a good time in Konoha." The shinobi then stepped back and gestured towards the village. "Enjoy your stay." "Thank you," Naruto said before he walked past both shinobi and into the village, aware of the guard's eyes boring into his back as he moved further into Konoha. Ignoring the lingering gazes that he could feel, Naruto focused on the village, trying to spot the differences that would have cropped up in the years since he last visited. Yet, apart from many of the buildings being new, some having been touched up with a coat of paint, or simply being more modern, nothing had truly changed. Sure, the fashion had progressed forward, less people wearing kimonos and instead changing to more functional clothing, and there was a subtle hum of electricity as it powered the lights and electronics inside the homes of the citizens and ninja of the village, but this was no different to any other village that Naruto had been to. The only thing that Naruto could really spot that hadn't been there before, as he walked through the village, was a new face on the Hokage monument, sitting to the right of Sarutobi Hiruzen. This could only be Namake's Minato, his potential son. Naruto stopped in the middle of the street and stared hard at the sculpted head of his possible child, trying to locate any similarities between himself and Minami and the face etched into the mountain's side. After a few moments of staring, his lips curled into a soft smile, almost unnoticeable unless one looked hard enough. Minato had Minami's face, her soft features, that much he could say if the stone carving was anything like the real thing. Naruto shook his head for a moment, snapping himself out of the momentary gaze, and turning towards the Hokage Tower, where he knew Minato would be. After looking at the stone bust, Naruto was now almost positive that Minato was his son, unless whoever designed the statue got Minato's features completely wrong. Now, all he had to do was to confirm his theories, and the only way he could do that was to take a good look at the Yondaime Hokage. Changing his direction and moving closer towards the village center, Naruto moved with a speed that almost made him want to cry. It was far too slow for his liking. He wanted to hurry up and find out if his son was alive. Yet, he knew he would have to go at this pace if he wanted to keep his cover, especially with the 8 ninja that were hiding on the rooftops observing his every movement. The journey to the Hokage Tower took noticeably longer than Naruto remembered, whether because of his impatience to get there or the knowledge that there were several ninja watching him. The length of the trek seemed stretched. But Naruto persevered through the annoying long length of time that it took him to arrive at the tower, and was now standing in front of the building, his cover still intact. Though the ninja that were still watching him were beginning to piss him off, as far as he knew he hadn't done anything that warranted suspicion, nor had he done anything that would have blown his cover, yet they still continued to follow him. He had even walked over to some random stand and bought some random antique, like someone his age would, yet they still continued to follow him, staying just out of his line of sight, yet nowhere near out of range. His sharp hearing couldn't make out any whispering, but he knew that ninja were supposed to be invisible. They probably had some kind of sign language so that they wouldn't have to use their mouths and possibly give away their position. Not that it really mattered with him. Naruto put that out of his mind and moved inside the tower, keeping his senses on alert. These ninjas suspect something about him. They wouldn't be watching him otherwise, so they might take him walking into somewhere important like the Hokage Tower as a reason to upgrade his status from suspect to threat. This rise in threat level would probably involve the authorization to use force if he did something they didn't like, and Naruto was pretty sure that a threat walking to the building that their leader resided in classified as something they didn't like. But, as he walked into the building, none of the ninja watching him moved. In fact, some of them began to move away. Naruto's momentary confusion was quickly erased when several other presences made themselves known to his sense. So the ones watching him previously were for a target outside, while these ones were either limited to the Hokage Tower or the Hokage's personal guard. Though, in Naruto's opinion, it seemed kind of redundant to have the Hokage, or any Kage for that matter, guarded when they were generally the strongest person in the village. If someone was strong enough to kill a Kage, it was highly unlikely that his guards would be able to do anything about it. Moving to the stairs, Naruto then began to trek upwards, his tails following him. As he passed several open doorways on his way to next flight of stairs to the next level in the tower, Naruto noticed that almost all of the occupants in the rooms snapped their heads from their desks, where they were writing reports of some kind, to look at him. Their eyes would almost immediately narrow by the most minuscule amount. That was all Naruto needed to see before he could come to his own conclusions about the Hokage Tower. The tower, while at first glance looked like it had 2 layers of defense, the guards and seals that lined the walls of the building actually had 3. The people working in the offices were a defense in themselves. All of them were trained ninja, most likely high-ranking ninja if they were doing paperwork, and therefore, highly skilled. Quite ingenious if Naruto said so himself. Not many people would take the office workers into account if they tried to attack this tower, and it would then lead the conclusion of almost any kind of assault into failure. Continuing to make his way up the flights of stairs of the Hokage Tower, Naruto eventually found himself outside a place that he had been to only a handful of times before. The Hokage's office. The secretary was nowhere to be seen, something that made Naruto raise an eyebrow, before he looked towards the door that would let him into the office of the leader of Konoha. At least without the secretary being here, he wouldn't have to explain why he should be let in without an appointment. Moving forward, Naruto was just about to place his hand on the door handle when he froze, not because of some sort of attack, but because of a thought. It was something that made Naruto question if he should walk through that door. Would Minato want him? Throughout the years, Naruto had dreamed of the moment when he was reunited with his children and wife. He had imagined Minato crying out with joy, himself doing the same, and his son leaping into his arms where he would hold him tightly. He had imagined Konan running towards him on her 2 tiny legs where he would pick her up and spin her around before holding her close. He had imagined Minami and himself running into each other's arms where they would hold each other and never let go. Yet now, as he stood just a few steps away from making a part of that dream a reality, his hopes were shattered by a single fact. Minato wasn't a little boy anymore. He was a grown man. He didn't need a father, he didn't need any parents. His son was an adult, and a shinobi no less. Would his father barging back into his life really be miracle or a curse? Naruto knew that if he walked through that door, that he wouldn't be able to leave, he wouldn't be able to simply walk away from his son, grown or not. He would want to be part of his life, he would want to know about him, share in his experiences. The thoughts conflicted in his mind, his heart yearning for his hand to reach out to grab the handle and turn, while his mind kept wondering if he was truly needed. But in the end, Naruto's choice was made for him. "Would you like to come in now?" came a voice from the other side of the door. "The door is unlocked." Naruto tensed for a moment when he heard the voice before he steeled his nerves and slowly reached for the handle, and then turned it. The door seemed to take years to swing open, slowly revealing the room to Naruto, the plank of wood seemingly swinging in slow motion. As soon as the door had opened far enough, Naruto's eyes zeroed in on the person sitting behind the desk, and his breath hitched in his throat. The most noticeable feature about the man sitting behind the desk was his blonde hair. It was spiky with 2 bangs that came down the side of his face, reaching his jaw. His eyes were a blue that Naruto had only seen recently on one other person. A blue headband was wrapped around his forehead with a metal plate with the Konohagakure emblem engraved on the surface. His outfit consisted of a blue Konoha uniform along with 2 bands on either sleeve and a green flak jacket under a white haori which was decorated with a flame design along the edges was his outfit. "Can I help you, civilian-san?" he said with a smile that reminded Naruto so much of his second wife. There was no doubt in Naruto's mind anymore, this was his son. "You look so much like your Ka-san," Naruto murmured, almost absent-mindedly as he gazed at his son. A small smile made it to his face while he forced back the tears that threatened to escape. However, Minato didn't appear to like being compared to his mother. As his face hardened, his eyes became cold and voice gaining a frigid tone. "So, that's why you're here." Naruto was slightly taken back by the sudden change in attitude of the man before him. Where before he had been welcoming and warm, he was now harsher than the deserts of Suna. Naruto was about to open his mouth to ask what was wrong when Minato snapped his fingers, resulting in 2 of ninja that had followed him dropping down and grabbing an arm each, keeping him in place. The disguised man had to restrain himself from using his strength flick off the dead weight, settling for struggling like a weak civilian would do. Naruto noticed that his captors were wearing animal masks and a different set of armor and clothing to any other ninja that he had come across. He idly wondered if this was that secret unit that Tobirama tried to put together. Turning back to his son, who was now walking towards him with a scowl on his face and surprising amount of anger for someone who had been quite happy moments ago, Naruto opened his mouth. "What are you doing, Minato?" Evidently, that was the wrong thing to say as the anger in Minato's eyes increased. "You have not earned the right to call me that, civilian-san," Minato told him with anger. "And unless you tell me why you are here, right now, I will have you thrown into one of the many free jail cells that we have available in the torture and interrogation department." Naruto paused halfway through saying his son's name when he saw his anger rising again. He gave a small sigh before trying again. "Hokage-sama, I don't know how to properly say this, but…" Naruto paused again before deciding to spit it out. "You're my son." The reaction that Naruto got wasn't something he expected. There was no surprise, no shock, no happiness, and no joy. Even the anger that Minato seemed to have before appeared to have been drained from his system, leaving only a cold indifference. A part of Naruto wished that the anger would come back. "So," Minato said, the cold indifference actually hurting Naruto more than the anger did. "You claim to be my two-san." When Naruto gave a slow nod, and Minato continued, "I have to admit, this is one of the cheaper scams I've come across." That knocked Naruto back. "Scam?" Naruto said in almost complete astonishment. "You think I'm lying?" Naruto couldn't hold back the hint of anger that came to his voice. Minato was his son, he wouldn't lie about something like that. "Isn't it obvious?" Minato told him as he stood up from behind his desk and moved around it to stop in front of Naruto. "We look almost nothing alike, and you come to supposedly claim me just after I have done something that the whole world has heard of." Minato let out a scoff. "I am not stupid. I'm Dash." Naruto froze as he processed Minato's words, and his own dyed his mouth as brain presented him to its conclusion. Minato seemed to take this silence as something else. "So, you finally admit that you're a liar?" Minato's face twisted as his anger reared its ugly head. "People like you make me sick. You would be willing to go so low as to impersonate a man's two-san, simply for fame and wealth. The sad part is that you're not the first to attempt something like this. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Looking at the man that Izumo and Kotetsu had marked as suspicious, Minato waited for an answer. Whatever answer Minato was expecting, however, it certainly wasn't the one that he got. "You can't remember anything, can you?" The words were soft, but Minato still heard them, and stiffened as he did so. A lance of sadness jabbed at Naruto's heart as he watched his son reacted to his words, knowing that he was right. His son couldn't remember his face, his sister's or his mother's. "You were about 5 when I lost you," Naruto continued. "You should be able to remember my face." Minato's visage then hardened again. "You have still showed me no proof of your relation to me. All you've done is taken incredibly lucky guesses." Naruto felt another lance of sadness at the anger directed at him, flinching slightly at the tone. Taking a small breath, Naruto stared into the Hokage's eyes and prayed that Minato would believe that he was his father. "Hokage-sama," Naruto said, afraid of fueling his son's rage. "In my robe's a scroll. It contains a painting of our family, the last one that we had together before our family was broken." As he watched Minato's face, Naruto saw that it displayed no reaction to the claim of proof, causing him to inwardly curse those that tried to take his place in his son's life. The ones before him might have had proof as well, making proving his own relation to Minato harder. The only other proof he could offer Minato, besides the painting, would be the story of how he was left alone in the world. With a signal to the unseen group of elite shinobi that were hiding in various places around the room, Naruto watched another revealed itself, showing off a snake mask. The shinobi moved up to Naruto's restrained position and shifted the sides of the brown haori that he was wearing, searching for the scroll. It didn't take long for them to find, hanging at his side along with several others that Naruto brought, the others holding several spare changes of clothes and other items. Taking all of them, the masked shinobi then turned his gaze to Naruto before looking back at the several scrolls in their hands, each one with a tag hanging from an end. "It's labeled," Naruto told them as the ninja then moved back over to the Hokage's desk before placing them on the surface and searching through them. Naruto noticed that Minato's gaze was locked onto the several scrolls. After a few seconds, the ninja turned back to Minato, presenting him with scroll with family portrait scribbled on a tag attached at one end. Naruto's son then took said scroll from their hands and then moved back to the desk and laid the scroll on top, before unraveling the parchment. Placing his hand on the Fuinjutsu matrix, Minato pumped chakra into the seal on the scroll. If it was some sort of attack, Minato had faith that his Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique, would be able to take himself and the scroll, along with whatever it was carrying, to a clear place before it detonated. There was a poof and a cloud of smoke appeared from the sealing scroll, obscuring whatever was taken from the scroll's contents. Naruto felt the hands holding his arms tighten ever so slightly as the cloud of smoke appeared, yet relax a second after when nothing happened. Naruto watched from his position as his son then reached into the clearing smoke and pulled out one of his most treasured possessions. The painting was something that reminded him of a much simpler time, when all he had to worry about was if his children and wife were happy. From his place between the two shinobi, Naruto was able to look over his son's shoulder and at the painting that he was holding. He could see the happy faces reflected back at him from the canvas, his son and daughter's grinning visage captured by the painter, his small, blue-haired daughter in her mother's arms, with his son standing in front of him, his own hands on his shoulders. But from his position, Naruto couldn't see his son's face, and how he was taking the appearance of the painting. He could find it as a fake, he could believe it, or he could wish for more proof. Only two of those outcomes were desirable for Naruto. "Who is the girl?" Minato questioned, knocking Naruto out of his thoughts. Minato hadn't turned around and was instead focusing on the portrait in front of him. "Was she adopted?" "No," Naruto said, causing Minato to turn around, allowing his father to see the mild surprise in his eyes. "She is your sister, born a year after you." Naruto saw Minato turn back to painting. "Your Ka-san said that she gained her looks from both her grandparents. Her name is Konan," he told him. "Your Ka-san's was Minami." Minato continued to stare at the painting for several more moments before placing the painting back down on the desk and turning to look at Naruto. "I'll admit, Naruto-san, my interest is piqued. None before you have produced a painting of such high quality to me as proof. None others had said that I have had a sister either," Minato said in a neutral tone. "There is only one other thing that I believe that you could present to me here that could convince me that you are indeed my two-san. You know what that is, don't you?" Minato moved around behind his desk and sat back in his chair, looking Naruto straight in the eyes. The disguised man didn't know when, but Minato gave a signal for the shinobi on either side of him to release their hold on his arms. The Hokage then gave a small gesture to the seat on the opposite side of his desk, an indication to sit. Naruto did so, sliding into the seat and placing his hands on the desk. This wasn't something that he had hoped to tell with company still in the room. However, if it got him his son back, then he would preserve through his own discomfort. "Your Ka-san and I met a few decades ago, Minato," Naruto began with a sigh. "It was several years before the Second Shinobi War, and I was merely wandering the roads. I never truly had a job. I was more like a hermit, living mostly off the land, only doing jobs in the towns that I went to for the most basic of supplies, clothes, medicines, things like that." Naruto shook his head to get himself back on track, glad to be able to move past the part of the story that required him to lie to his son. "Anyway, I was merely walking along the road near Kusa no Kuni, Land of Grass, when I encountered your Ka-san. She was running from several bandits that had attacked her family's caravan. They had murdered the rest of her family, and his was only thanks to luck that she managed to escape. After your Ka-san ran into me, I defeated using several skills that I had learned through my travels. She then followed me to the closest village," Naruto continued, "where she said that she would then find someone who would be able to take her to her home, further north. During the time we spent on the road together, I grew fond of her." A small smile managed to worm its way to Naruto's face as he retold the story. The owner of the smile didn't notice it, but Minato did. Her face was cherry red when she asked if I would like to accompany her to her home. She looked like a tomato. Naruto released a chuckle at the memory, and surprisingly enough, Minato did as well. Naruto didn't comment, but prayed that the chuckle was a good sign. "As I'm sure you can guess, I agreed and followed her home, where we eventually fell in love and had both you and Konan. Nothing made your Ka-san happier than when she was holding the two of you. You were quite hyper when you were a child, quite inquisitive as well," Naruto told his son. "Minami used to pull her hair out of her head and worry when she couldn't find you after you wandered off somewhere." Naruto gave another chuckle. "A bit like me when I was younger in that regard, but I could always find you when you ran off." Naruto's smile then diminished as the tale progressed, mentally going over the events in his mind as he spoke them, remembering his failure. During the Second Shinobi War, IWA ninja assumed control over the town where we lived, taking several men from their homes and putting them to work. But as they began to require more forces, a forced conscription began to take place, not involving the men and women, but the children. Naruto sighed as he continued. They rounded up any child with above-average reserves for their age, sent them back to IWA to be trained. Your Ka-san and I left almost as soon as we heard, packing what was needed, and set off for the south, towards the land of rivers. Neither of us wanted you to be taken from us, Minato. Naruto looked to his son, trying to convey his feelings through a meeting of the eyes, but Minato had his closed, whether to prevent himself from meeting Naruto's eyes or process the information he was receiving, Naruto didn't know. It was during the trip that we were separated. Naruto continued, wanting to end the story quickly, Minato's constant silence making him feel slightly uncomfortable. While we were walking, we came upon a group of ninja, discussing several matters that were covert. They heard us. Naruto said, omitting the fact that it was Minato that had alerted them. His son didn't need to know that. And moved to kill us, all of us. I told Minami to run, to get away along with you and Konan, while I held off the ninja. She took you both and ran further ahead. Naruto released a breath as he moved to finish the story. I managed to subdue the ninja, but what I didn't know was that one managed to move past me while I was preoccupied. By the time I realized that one had gotten past. Naruto didn't finish his sentence. There was enough for anyone to infer what happened. Your Ka-san's body was burned beyond all recognition. All that was left to identify her with was what remained of her hair and clothing. Naruto let out another breath as he continued. This was the first time he had told this story to another being, and it was much harder than he had previously anticipated. I never found yours or Konan's bodies. I had assumed that they had been incinerated by the fire. After I gave your sister and Ka-san a burial, I went into seclusion, much like I had previously done before I met your Ka-san. Naruto looked again to Minato, finding the man looking back at him with open eyes. But when I heard rumors about a man named Minato, with blonde hair, a spark of hope came back to my heart. So I came here, to see if the man that Konoha called the Yondaime Hokage was my son, hoping that I was wrong all those years ago. Naruto let another smile come to his face as he looked at the man he knew was his son. And I don't think that I've been as grateful as I am now that I did. He kept his gaze locked with that of his son, not swaying. He could sense that his son was searching him with his eyes. Searching for deceit, for half-truths, for an alternative motive, for something that would discredit his story. But Naruto knew he would find none. This seemed to go on for years, the two of them merely staring straight at each other, either moving. The ANBU in the room shuffled uncomfortably, not truly knowing what to do. The elder of the two sitting people may have done something to their Hokage, but none of them had seen him make any suspicious movements, nor gestures, yet all of them knew that it wasn't impossible to do a genjutsu without moving. But at the same time, all of them knew that this was an important moment for their leader. This was the furthest that any person had come in convincing the blonde Kage that they were his father. Should they interfere with a possibly life-changing moment in their Kage's life, or should they let it play out? In the end, none of them got the chance to act as their leader rapidly blinked while bringing a hand up to his eye. He gave a small watery chuckle as his hand rubbed away at the eye. I believe you, Minato said finally after the several moments of silence. So I guess you really are my Two-san, Minato told the man opposite him. I always did wonder what he would look like, what features I inherited from him. Naruto gave Minato a smile as some tears began to appear in the corners of pseudo-black-haired man's eyes. I bet you didn't think that you took after your Ka-san, did you? Naruto asked Minato, who gave a short shake of the head. No, I always thought of my looks coming from my Two-san. Minato's hand finally pulled away from his eye as he gave his father a smile. Naruto then decided to ask for something he had wanted for a long time. So, could you give your Two-san a hug? It is a way to make up for all the birthday presents you were supposed to get me? Naruto said jokingly, though Minato could sense a hint of wanting in his father's voice and was able to immediately decrypt the hidden meaning behind the words. Well, I could, but what about all of my birthdays that you missed? Minato said, returning the joke, and getting up from his seat as he spoke, Naruto doing the same moments later. I'm sure I could find something to give you to make up for the many birthdays that I missed. Naruto said as he walked around the side of Minato's desk, the owner of said desk doing the same. And I'm sure that I could find a nice walking stick for you, Two-san, Minato said cheekily, while a small tick mark appeared on Naruto's forehead at the comment. I'm not that old, you can't make old jokes about me yet, Naruto told his son, but the denial didn't work as well as it should have when Naruto knew that if anyone in the world deserved to be called old, it would be him. Minato gave a chuckle, making Naruto give him a small smile. The two of them were standing in front of one another at the side of Minato's desk. Naruto looked at his son, his own flesh and blood, someone he had thought he had lost years ago was now standing before him, within touching distance. A chuckle made its way out of his throat. I've waited for this moment for so long, Naruto said as he gazed at Minato, the genjutsu still hiding his true hair and eye color. I had thought that it was out of my reach a month ago, but here I am, standing in front of my son. So have I too, San, Minato replied. I had hoped when I was a child that my mother or father would come for me. Naruto winced slightly at the words, but Minato continued as if it didn't happen. As I grew older, I began to believe less and less that my parents would come for me until eventually I simply stopped believing altogether. Like with you too, San, a month ago, I would have never have thought this possible. I never imagined that I would be standing in front of my father, and would have called anyone who said so crazy. But here I am, standing in front of my too, San. Naruto brought a hand up to quickly rub his eye before he turned his attention back to his son. So is my big, manly son going to give me a hug, or is he too old for that? Naruto asked his son. Minato simply chuckled and opened his arms, Naruto doing the same, and for the first time in almost 2 decades, father and son were reunited. Neither half of the embracing couple noticed that A and Bu in the room take up their hidden positions once more, letting the father and son have their moment. As far as Naruto was concerned, there was nothing that could spoil this moment for him. It was his dreams come true. He had his son back. It was like Kami had taken pity on him and given him back something that he had thought he had lost. A small tear made its way down the side of his face as he held his son for the first time in so long, followed by a few more. He imagined Minami smiling down at him from her position in the Johto, Pure Lands. Naruto didn't know how long they stayed in each other's embrace, but like all good things, it had to come to an end. Minato was the one that moved to pull apart, with Naruto doing the same after much internal grumbling. Holding his father at arm's length, Minato decided that it was now his turn to tell his story. I supposed I should tell you what happened after Kasen ran away? Minato said to his father, who gave a small nod. Both men then moved back to their former positions on either side of Minato's desk. I supposed I should start off by saying that when you said that I couldn't remember my childhood, that wasn't entirely true. Minato explained. The majority of my life before I came to Konoha is blur, but I sometimes get flashes of a face or a few words, but they're always gone before I can truly take in what I'm being shown. Minato cleared his throat before continuing. Anyway, while I don't remember all of what happened, I do know enough to put the pieces together, especially with what you told me too, San. A small smile appeared on Minato's face. It still feels weird to call anyone too, San. I can't believe I get to call someone my son. Naruto agreed. Moving on, Minato said, continuing. While I can't remember the entire thing, I do remember flashes of what happened. A small frown made its way to Minato's visage. It's not much, but I can remember a woman, most likely Kasen, telling me to run. I remember fire, feeling heat lick at my skin. I remember Kasen telling me to run, again, but this time further away than the last time. Then all I can remember is running for my life. I don't hear any more voices after that, but I remember hitting something hard before blacking out. Minato gave a sigh, frustrated at the lack of what he could remember. When I would then wake up, it would be in the Konoha hospital with little memory of anything before. They said that I was found knocked out near a few destroyed trees by a patrol a few kilometers from Konoha. I was then put in an orphanage where I then joined the Shinobi Academy at 6. Once I then reached the rank of Genin at 10, I was allowed to legally leave the orphanage. Minato was then cut off when Naruto spoke, disbelief in his voice. You moved out of an orphanage when you were 10? How did you make money to survive? Why were you allowed to? The shock at what Minato had said was as clear as day on Naruto's face, and his son could not help laugh at it a bit. A ninja is considered a legal adult when they become a genin, and I paid for the apartment with the money I made from D-rank missions, along with some extra odd jobs that I picked up, Minato said when he spoke again. I believe that you can guess what I did after that. I rose through the ninja ranks until I became a Hokage candidate and got the position. Are you sure that's all? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow to his son, causing the blonde to give him a questioning look. Call it a father's intuition, but I can sense that there is something that you're not telling me? Minato gave a slightly nervous laugh, his hand coming up to rub the back of his head. Oh yeah, about that, see, the strange thing is that I may have, possible, kind of dash. Minato's dancing around with words was put to a halt when Naruto began to laugh, quite hard. Minato's father couldn't believe it. It seemed that his son didn't get only his mother's looks. Finally getting his laughter under control, Naruto explained his actions. Your Ka-san was almost exactly the same when she asked me to go with her back to her home. She was stuttering and dancing around the point of her words, much like you are now. In fact, the only difference between the two of you would be the fact that she was also red in the face, Naruto said with a chuckle as he remembered again how nervous his wife could be. Sorry for the interruption, Minato, continue. Okay, well, you see. Minato stuttered a bit before taking a calming breath. Once he felt that he had himself under control, he looked his father in the eyes and finally spoke. I can behave a girlfriend. Naruto blinked at the sudden spewing of words before taking a finger and using it to clear his ear while Minato gave a sheepish smile towards his father. I'm sorry, Naruto said after he had taken his finger out of his ear. What? Minato gave another small nervous laugh before managing to calm himself down. Who knew it could be so hard to tell a parent that they had a girlfriend? I have a girlfriend, Minato managed to say after measuring every single word, making sure to pronounce each syllable carefully as to not muddle up his speech again, but also making sure to pay attention to his father's reaction to his news. Naruto blinked again at his son's confession, his brain processing what had been said yet at the same time, refusing to believe what it was being told. His son, a boy who up until an hour or two ago, he had always pictured as a small 5-year-old child. Being told by his son that he had a girlfriend erased whatever thoughts he had that his son was that same 5-year-old boy that loved his blue shirt. His son was a grown man now, and it was in that instant that Naruto knew that he could either accept it and move forward from here as a figure in his son's life or deny it and be restricted to watching from a distance. His choice was obvious. So, Naruto said with a smile coming to his features, you have a girlfriend. Do I get to meet her? His smile then turned sly. After all, I need to make sure that she is fit to date my son. Strangely enough, Minato slightly paled at those words. I don't think that would be a good idea too, San. Minato stuttered slightly, fearing the wrath of his girlfriend. She might take offense to that. While more powerful than his girlfriend, Minato knew that when truly angered, there was nothing that could stand in her way. Naruto internally raised an eyebrow at his son's sudden stuttering. Deciding to play along until he could determine why, Naruto spoke again. Okay, fine, but do I get to meet my future daughter-in-law? He teased, while Minato blushed slightly at the teasing. ANBU. Minato called after getting his face's color under control, one of the ninja with animal masks appearing less than a second after being called. Bring Kushina Uzumaki to my office. Naruto mentally raised an eyebrow at the last name of Minato's girlfriend before turning to look at the ANBU shinobi, who, instead of moving off to complete his duty, spoke. That will be unnecessary, Hokage-sama. Uzumaki-san is currently waiting outside your office. We kept her there so that she wouldn't interrupt your current business. The ninja reported in a monotone voice, not revealing any sort of personal opinion on the matter. Minato paled visibly at the answer that was given to him. How long was she waiting? Naruto's son asked, already fearing the information that he would receive, while Naruto merely watched with interest at the interaction between his son and the ninja. 10 minutes, Hokage-sama. The masked ninja replied, causing Minato pale a bit more before releasing a sigh. Send her in, he said, as if resigning himself to his fate. The ANBU nodded once before vanishing back into the shadows of the room, with the door opening a second later as a person came through. Said person then immediately made their displeasure at being kept waiting known. Minato Baka, Databane! A voice yelled as the owner stormed into the room, either ignoring Naruto's presence, or simply oblivious to it, and focusing on the cringing man behind the desk. Said person wore a flak jacket that Naruto had seen several ninja wearing, over a black short-sleeved shirt along with black form-fitting pants that reached her calves. A blue forehead protector was on her brow, with red hair tied up in a high ponytail along with strands framing the sides of her face. Violet eyes burned with a fire that was aimed at Minato as the owner of the orb stomped her way towards him. As she moved around the Minato's side of the desk, she reached over and slapped said man over the head with her hand. You Baka idiot! She said again as Minato rubbed the back of his head. I'm your girlfriend, you don't make your girlfriend wait on you, even if you're the Hokage. I don't care if you're on in meeting the Ōtsutsuki to sort out peace between the nations. When you make a date with your girlfriend, you better keep it Minato baka. The woman that Naruto could confidently say was Kushina Uzumaki then folded her arms across her chest. So? What do you have to say for yourself? Naruto then noticed Kushina's eyes narrowed dangerously, instinctively moving away from the redhead slightly as his own experiences of having that kind of gaze leveled at him came to the forefront of his mind. And you better have a good answer for ditching me on our date, or I swear that you'll envy the beating that I give Jiraiya when I'm done with you, Databane. Kushina then raised her fist in a threatening display while Minato held both hands out in front of him, trying to ward off the beating that he could feel coming. Kushina-chan, don't! Minato then turned his gaze to his father. We have company, he said, pointing a finger over to his father, with his girlfriend following the finger to find the one who had held up her date. Her eyes immediately narrowed further, as her gaze landed on Naruto, who found himself feeling quite small at the moment. So, Kushina spoke in deceptively calm tone as she cracked her knuckles. You're the reason that I didn't get to eat the food of the gods today. Minato's girlfriend then moved back around to the other side of the desk, and bent over so that she and Naruto were eye level, a creepy smile appearing on her face. Well, I hope you're ready for a knuckle sandwich. Her smile then turning into a grin that would have petrified a lesser being. 'Cause I got plenty, Databane. Kushina then raised her hand and prepared to deliver a blow to Naruto, only for Minato to interject, waving his arms around in order to get his girlfriend to stop. Kushina, don't! He yelled, getting her fist to stop several centimeters over its rightful target. Why not? The redhead gritted out through her teeth, her eyes locked on the target of her ire. He interrupted a date that you have promised me for weeks, Databane. Give me one reason why I shouldn't clobber this old fart. Minato winced slightly at Kushina's rather crude terminology. Because that old fart, as you put it, as I discovered today, is my 2 san. The silence was deafening as both Minato and Naruto watched Kushina process the new information that had been given to her, before her eyes suddenly widened as it all clicked into place. With a nervous chuckle, Kushina lowered the fist that she had held over Naruto, her whole demeanor changing as she did so. Sorry about that, Namikaze-sama, she said sheepishly. I didn't know that you were spending time with your son, I'll just leave. As she finished, she turned to walk towards the door, only for a hand to snatch at her wrist. Turning around to see who had grabbed her, thinking that it might have been Minato, she was surprised to see that it was her boyfriend's father who was attacked to the hand. It's okay, the dark-haired male said, amusement twinkling in his eyes. I would like to see just who had caught my son's attention. Kushina turned back towards the other two occupants in the room while Naruto released his hand from her wrist, standing up as he did so. Minato then moved around his desk. 2-san, this is Kushina Uzumaki, my girlfriend. Kushina-chan, this is my 2-san, Naruto. The Hokage said, introducing the two to each other, both adults shaking the other's hand in greeting. So, Minato said after the greetings were exchanged. How about we get something to eat? Naruto had seen many things throughout his life, many disgusting and disturbing, some rage-inducing and angering, others were some of the most pleasant things that he had been allowed to lay eyes on. Yet he didn't know how to classify what he was currently looking at. Currently seated on a stool in front of a small ramen shop, Minato sitting between himself and Kushina, Naruto watched as his son's girlfriend inhaled the shop's food, downing a large bowl of the broth within a minute. Naruto felt like he should be disgusted, but the simple fact that she was on her 6th bowl without having thrown up was amazing. Where was she putting this stuff? Naruto was sure that she had eaten more than a regular stomach could hold. Stranger still, Minato was simply eating normally. He hadn't looked over or spoke a word to his girlfriend since they had arrived, not that it looked like she would notice or respond based on how focused she was in shoving as much ramen as she could down her throat. Turning back to his own bowl of miso ramen before him, Naruto pushed it away. Whatever appetite he had was gone after witnessing the eating ritual of Kushina Uzumaki when it concerned the food of the gods, as she put it. Hearing a chuckle, he looked up to see a roughly 30-year-old man dressed in white kimono and chef's hat, most likely one of the employees. Don't worry, it happens to everyone when they first see her eat, the cook explained. You'll eventually build up a resistance to it. Only the true iron stomachs can watch her eat for the first time. Tochi, the man then introduced. Owner of Ramen Ichiraku. Naruto, said man replied. Has Kushina always eaten like that? No, but she hasn't eaten ramen for a while. This is the result of ramen withdrawal, as Kushina has named it. Basically, she's making up for all the ramen she missed. Tucci told Minato's father. I know that she's always liked ramen, but I think that she only liked ramen this much after she was forced to come here about 10 years ago. That's the power of my ramen, the cook said with a grin. What do you mean forced to come here? Naruto inquired. Tucci immediately lost his smile at those words. I thought that the exchange program between Konoha and Uzushigakure was voluntary. Tucci looked to Kushina, who was still scoffing down ramen by the bowl, and then to Minato, who was watching them out of the corner of his eye. Minato gave a nod to Tucci before returning his focus to his food. I can't tell you the whole story, Tucci explained when he turned back to Naruto, his voice significantly lower than before. Because not only do I not know it, but it isn't my story to tell, it's Kushina's. All I know for certain is that Kushina was made to come here after an argument with her family, which is still in Uzushigakure. It has put a severe strain between herself and her family. She won't speak of her parents to anyone bar close friends, and even then it isn't much. Tucci let out a sigh before continuing. Hopefully with the war over she'll be able to reconcile with her parents, but I think it will take a long time before she even thinks about it. Naruto gave the ramen chef a nod of thanks before Tucci went to make another bowl of ramen for Kushina. The red-headed Uzumaki had already nearly finishing her 7th bowl. Naruto then lost himself in the information that Tucci had given him. The Uzumaki clan were quite family-orientated, so for them to forcefully send one of their own somewhere would mean that it would take them out of danger somehow or would be in their best interests. But obviously Kushina didn't think that it was. Still, he didn't have enough knowledge to draw up a possible theory about what happened, but made a note to talk about it to Kushina when she was more comfortable around him. Naruto looked over to notice that Kushina had finished what appeared to be her last bowl of ramen, placing the now empty bowl on top of the stack that was next to her. That was some good ramen, Tucci. You never cease in your top-quality food. The cook chuckled from the kitchen where he was busy preparing another serving of ramen for another customer. Your praise is always welcome, Kushina. There is never enough praise for the food of the gods, Databane. Kushina exclaimed with a fist raised in the air. Kushina, by the amount of times that you say that, I think that whole world knows by now. A voice said from behind Kushina with amusement in their tone. Kushina's face colored slightly before she turned around and leaped at the figure, engulfing them in a hug. Mikoto-chan! Kushina yelled as she hugged her friend with said friend hugging back. With a brown blouse, a dark purple skirt and blue shinobi sandals, you could almost miss her on the street if it was for the sandals that signified her as a ninja. But for Naruto, it was her hair and eyes that told him that she was anything but common. Long, dark hair and eyes, the trademark signals of a Uchiha clansman, and in the village that said clan resided in, it was unlikely that she was merely a kunoichi with similar traits to the Sharingan users. This put Naruto slightly on edge. A Sharingan, while not able to pick out genjutsu as easily like a Byakugan could, would be able to see that there was a genjutsu affecting Naruto's eyes and hair. It would merely take a Sharingan user a bit more focused to identify said illusion. That is Mikoto Uchiha, one of Kushina-chan's friends. Minato pointed out from beside him as they both spun around on their stools to face the hugging duo. She was one of the first people to befriend Kushina after she arrived here. Mikoto-chan, what are you doing here? I thought you were hanging around the Uchiha compound with Fugaku team, bastard. Kushina asked, saying the entire thing with a smile on her face. Mikoto gave a small snort. Kushina, I wish you wouldn't call my husband that. Despite what you feel, I do love Fugaku. Mikoto said to her friend while Kushina pouted and folded her arms. But he stole my Mikoto time. She whined. How am I meant to like someone like that, especially when you never have any time for me? Mikoto merely raised an eyebrow at her friend's childish behavior. I do spend time with you, you're usually too busy being lip-locked with Minato to see a dash. A hand from Kushina covering Mikoto's mouth prevented her from continuing while the Uzumaki blushed at her friend's words. Removing her hand from her friend's mouth, Kushina then turned her head around to meet Naruto's amused eyes before turning back to whisper in her friend's ear. Mikoto's eyes snapped to Naruto as Kushina whispered before a devious smile appeared on her face. She then moved away from Kushina and towards Naruto, taking the seat beside him. Oh, Naruto-san, do I have stories to tell you about how that sexual deviant over there has been corrupting your son, turning him from a sweet innocent boy into a horrible man. Mikoto began to wail in faux sadness, leaning over to rest her head on Naruto's shoulder as she cried. I tried to save him, she said as she looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. But the evil that is Kushina Uzumaki was too strong. Mikoto then leaned back on his shoulder crying again. Mikoto! Kushina exclaimed, causing both Naruto and Mikoto to look over at the Uzumaki, who was blushing a bright red. Naruto then turned his head to look at his son and chuckled at the flush of red that adorned his cheeks. What are you doing? Kushina squeaked as her face matched her hair. Mikoto merely chuckled, any sign of tears vanishing as she stood up from the stool. That's for pranking Fugaka last month. I had to listen to him rant and rave about you for 20 minutes. Walking back over to Kushina, Mikoto folded her arms in front of her friend. Let that be a reminder to you. I can get you into a lot of trouble if I choose. Stupid acting and stupid infiltration expert. Kushina grumbled as her face returned to its normal color. So, Naruto-san, Mikoto said, turning back to Naruto. Have you had a tour of Konoha yet? No, and it's just Naruto Mikoto-san. Naruto told the black-haired woman. Minato-kun and his girlfriend were both about to give me tour after we finished our lunch. Would you mind if I intrude, Naruto? And call me Mikoto. Mikoto-san is for casual acquaintances. The Uchiha told the green-eyed man. You may follow us if you wish, Mikoto, Naruto said to the Uchiha. As the group then began to move through the streets of Konoha, pointing out various notable places in the village hidden in the leaves, they began to attract the attention of populace of the village. Civilian and shinobi pointed and whispered as their recently appointed Hokage walked through the streets with two of his kunoichi and another male. Many had seen their leader with the red-headed Uzumaki before, and occasionally with the Uchiha. Both were quite well known, but the appearance of an unknown male sent the gossips into overdrive. Whispers spread through the crowd, who all stopped and stared as they went past, about how the man was a representative from another village that wished to join into an alliance with Konoha after their performance in recently ended war. But this was quickly overridden by the rumor about how he was an IWA spy who was sent by the Otsutsuki to assassinate their Hokage. This theory was then quickly put away by many believe that their Hokage had traveled to the future using his sealing power, and managed to bring back one of the future Hokage so that they could be warned of all future conflicts. Naruto heard all this and more as he walked beside his son and his girlfriend and her friend, snorting inwardly at the sheer absurdity of some of the rumors. Did these people really have nothing better to do besides spread such ridiculous theories? Paying attention even as these thoughts ran through his head, Naruto looked over as his son pointed to a building near the base of the Hokage monument. That's the Shinobi Academy, or Academy for short. Based beside that, as I'm sure you've already realized, is the Hokage's office. Above that is the Hokage monument, a mountain with the faces of the Hokage, past and present, carved into its surface. Minato explained as they walked down a street towards said building. They had left the crowded marketplace behind them, as they had moved about, losing the villagers in the twisted maze of streets that Konoha seemed to have in large supply. Naruto didn't remember that many streets when he was last here. It looks incredibly impressive, Minato, Naruto said to his son as he stopped, prompting the rest of the group to do the same. I'm incredibly proud of what you have achieved, even if I have not been able to witness it firsthand. It was true, despite not having a father or mother, despite having no support from anyone but himself, Minato had come from nothing and made something of himself. Not necessarily something that Naruto would have liked, but he had no right to say so. He hadn't been there for Minato when he was most needed, so he had no right to criticize his son's choices. They were his to make. But even so, Naruto was still proud. Minato had created a life for himself from nothing. He had grown strong without help, and for that, Naruto was proud. A smile made its way to Minato's face under his father's praise. Thank you too, San. That means a lot coming from you. Minato then turned to look at the Hokage monument before turning back to Naruto. This is all there is to see on the civilian side of Konoha, unless you would like to visit some of the training grounds. Minato asked the question with complete calm in his voice, but Naruto caught the hidden meaning behind the question, and what certain answers would mean. He wants to know if I'll take an interest in his profession as ninja but doesn't want to be obvious, Naruto mused. If I'll pay attention when he tells me what techniques he learned, watch him perform new ones and offer him an ear to use to rebound ideas off, or if I'll let my mind wander when he talks. Naruto then internally raised an eyebrow as something else hit him. He doesn't really think that I wouldn't see through that, does he? He must really be unaware of where he gets his intelligence from. I think it's time I remind him. Looking towards his son, Naruto let a smile come to his features. Minato, if you wanted to know if I would express interest in your shinobi training and abilities, you could have just asked. His smile grew a bit bigger, and a small laugh escaped from his throat as Minato's eyes widened slightly at being caught out. You got Minami's appearance, Minato. What does that leave for you to inherit from me? Now I believe we have some training grounds to visit. With that, Naruto continued to walk forward, leaving Minato, and his friends who he was certain had heard but most likely wouldn't have understood, time to put together the pieces of what happened. Behind him, Minato blinked at the place that his father was standing at moments before. He had underestimated the man, that much was as plain as day, treating him as if he was a civilian instead of like another ninja. Minato shook his head as he tried to remove himself from the stupor he was in. What was that about? Questioned Kushina as she came up behind him. She had taken to Mikoto while he had pointed out landmarks of the village to his father, leaving the father and son time to bond. Why was he laughing? Turning to look at the one he loved dearly, Minato felt a smile make its way to his face. It's nothing, simply Toussaint showing me that I'm more like him than I realize. Chapter 17. The training ground that Naruto found himself, once his son and friends caught up to him, was covered mostly in trees. A small clearing was the only reprieve that one would have from the green forest, other than a path that wound its way from the clearing to the edge of the domestic district of Konoha. A river cut through part of the clearing, artificial in nature. It was said that the Nidaime Hokage created it by accident, while practicing higher in the mountains around Konoha. It was in this training ground 3 as it was called, that Naruto raised an eyebrow at the sole Uchiha of the group, her request taking him, and Minato and Kushina by surprise, though he suspected both had seen this coming. I'm sorry, Naruto said to Mikoto, shaking his head as if to clear his ears. But I thought you said you wanted to fight me? The disbelief in his voice was quite clear. Correct, Naruto, Mikoto told the disguised man. Kushina told me that you defeated several ninja. I wished to see if this is true. Naruto turned his head to look at Kushina, who blushed red and chuckled, averting her gaze. Naruto then turned back to Mikoto. He knew that Minato had told Kushina a short version of the story that he had told him, but he had hoped that Kushina would have had a bit of self-control when it came to things that should remain with the relevant parties. He understood that Mikoto was her friend, but she had no business knowing his story and Kushina had no right to tell her. That was reserved to Minato and himself. Could I not demonstrate on the logs? Naruto asked, gesturing to the 3 logs that were standing in the clearing, quite out of place if he said so himself, but they might be there for a reason. Those aren't used to practice taijutsu, Toussaint, Minato told his father. They're actually used for the final test for academy students to decide if they're ready to become genin. Naruto gave a sigh. He could fight Mikoto, but that run the risk of her activating her Sharingan and spotting the illusion, yet not fighting her could rock the trust that Minato had for him. Minato might believe his story and trust in what he said, but that trust was still new and fragile. Not fighting Mikoto, for whatever reason, could result in the breaking said trust, especially when he had no reason as to why he couldn't fight. Thus, his choice was obvious. If I fight you, you don't use your digitsu, Naruto told her. It's an unfair advantage considering that I can't use chakra to the capacity that you can, nor was I trained like you were. Naruto hoped they bought it. Having Mikoto agree to the restriction of pure taijutsu would make the chance of being discovered far lower. There was always the chance of her activating her clan's Kekkei Genkai subconsciously, but he could only pray to whatever deity was out there that it didn't happen. Deal. Mikoto agreed, to Naruto's relief. I don't know what made you think that I would use the Sharingan in my fight with you, Naruto. You may be skilled in taijutsu, but you are only a civilian, while I am a fully trained jonin. There should be no need for me to activate it. Naruto felt for a moment that if he opened his mouth to dignify those words with a response, that he would be able to taste the arrogance. While not to the level that he had experienced with other Uchiha clansmen that he had run into in the past, he was posing as a civilian who weren't known for their power. The arrogance that Mikoto displayed was quite annoying to someone who knew that they would be able to crush her with both eyes closed and hands tied behind their back. Naruto said nothing. He turned around and walked to the other side of the clearing, towards the strange kunai-like monument that stood near one end of the clearing. Turning around, he found Mikoto was dressed in shinobi uniform, a green flak jacket, just like Kushina, with a black, no-sleeved, shirt along with a pair of pants of the same color underneath. A pouch was strapped to Mikoto's right thigh, another strapped to her left. A forehead protector was wrapped around her left arm. She wore no armor aside from the flak jacket, and 2 shin guards strapped to her legs. As if sensing the question within his head, Mikoto spoke without a prompt. I always come prepared for anything, Naruto. It comes with being an infiltration expert. You'd also be surprised at the training that you undertake when you strive to be an infiltration expert. Changing speed is one of those things, I presume? Naruto questioned with a bit of disbelief in his voice. You'd be surprised, it saved my life more than once, Mikoto told him. Minato, would you mind being the proctor? Minato shuffled slightly from his position at the side of the clearing, Kushina beside him, slightly uncomfortable with what was happening. On one hand, this was something that he knew he would have brought up sooner or later, and would have most likely settled with Naruto giving a demonstration of his skills, so really he shouldn't have anything to be uncomfortable with. But on the other hand, he wasn't exactly okay with Mikoto potentially beating up his father. Sure, his father had said that he had taken down shinobi, but that had been almost 2 decades ago, plenty of time for skills to deteriorate, along with the body. Minato! Naruto called, breaking Minato out of his inner argument, and causing him to look to his father. Call the match. Minato gave a nod at the look in his father's eyes. He was certain about this match, and not being pressured into it, that was enough to put his conscience at ease. Are both participants ready? Minato questioned, a nod from both sides of the clearing being his answer. Begin. Mikoto was the first to move, blurring across the distance between herself and Naruto at a speed that would make most Chunin blanch. To Mikoto, she knew this was nothing. She could easily go twice her current speed, but took no pleasure in fighting Naruto. Her words might have sounded like she did, but she was doing what she was in order to look out for Minato. The blonde had been her friend for years, along with Kushina. She was fighting Naruto in order to validate his story. The man looked like an ordinary civilian, though his clothes hid any sort of muscular build that he might have. He had said that he had fought off multiple shinobi at once, which would require skill in taijutsu that she couldn't believe from an ordinary civilian. His chakra levels were also barely higher than a mid-level genin, so that ruled out any sort of physical enhancement via chakra. Using it more than a few times would drain his chakra to near exhaustion, and it was incredibly unlikely that he would have been able to take out each shinobi in a single movement. As she appeared directly in front of the elderly, dark-haired man, Mikoto learned something new about not only Naruto, but Minato as well. The first she learned when, instead of flying back from a straight kick to the stomach, Naruto caught his kick at his chest, gripping her foot with his 2 hands. Lifting both hands upwards, Mikoto found herself off balance as her foot was forcibly raised above her head, though she forgot about this as her one grounded leg was swept out from under her. Momentarily hanging motionlessly in midair, waiting for gravity to take a hold of her once more, Mikoto found a fist burying itself into her stomach and launching her back the way she came, tumbling across the ground as she did so before she managed to right herself, skidding back several meters as her feet found purchase on the ground. It was then that Mikoto learned that Naruto, despite her own misgivings, had been telling the truth about his skill. That simple maneuver, a glimpse at his true ability, easily confirmed that. The second part to this that Mikoto learned was that Naruto's skills had not dulled in the years since he had taken down those ninja. It was when Mikoto came back to her senses, her inner musings over, that she realized something about Minato. As her eyes came back into focus, her brain had just enough time to process a single thought before a fist impacted her face, launching her backwards, her body crashing into the river behind her with a splash. Minato fights just like his Two-san, with speed. Retracting his fist from its extended position, Naruto turned to look at the 2 audience members who were both watching him with partially open mouths. A slight frown made it to Naruto's face as he spoke. Either you thought I was lying, Naruto told them both, when I said that I took down shinobi, or you thought that my skills would have deteriorated to the point that I was merely an athletic civilian. So which is it? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. Minato shook his head to snap himself out of the daze he was in. It was either Two-san, Minato assured. I simply thought that Mikoto would put up more of a fight. I didn't expect her to be defeated so swiftly. The sound of her friend's name seemed to be enough to snap Kushina out of her own daze. Mikoto-chan, she said with a yell as she rushed towards the river in time to see her friend surface from the water near the riverbank with a gasp. Kushina moved to help her friend pull herself from the waterway and lay on the shore of the stream, face up, where she tried to catch her breath. Mikoto-chan, are you all right? Yes, Mikoto told her once she regained a normal breathing pattern. I'm fine. I underestimated Minato's Two-san a bit though, didn't I? Kushina giggled a bit at her friend, now that the danger had passed. Yeah, you got your ass hooped by an old man. Kushina then snickered. I'm going to tell everyone about this, you do know that, right? Mikoto paled a bit at the hit to not only her pride as a kunoichi, but to her clan as well, if it got out that she got beaten solidly by someone who could pass Shikoda off as her father. The Uchiha was about to open her mouth in order to blackmail Kushina into silence when another voice spoke up. You know that this old man is well within hearing range and is willing to give you a first-hand demonstration of what he did to Mikoto if you wish to keep talking, Kushina. The voice made Kushina pale a bit while her friend chuckled at her face. No, that's fine, Naruto. Did I ever tell you how young and radiant you look today? Kushina asked with nervousness in her voice. To anyone else, she wouldn't have really cared what they thought and simply continued doing, but this was the father of her boyfriend. What could she do? Beside his father, Minato gave a small chuckle at his girlfriend's behavior. It was hilarious to see the usually loud and brash Kushina Uzumaki act so nervous, for whatever reason. He could see why Kushina wasn't acting like she usually, being afraid of offending his father in some way and for him to demand for the two of them to split. He could see how it was a genuine concern for Kushina, not knowing what Naruto thought of her, and not knowing what he was like nor what it would take to anger him, but Minato knew that his father would never demand such a thing. It was simply a feeling that Minato had, along with a bit of reasoning. From what Minato had managed to piece together, he was his mother on the outside, and his father on the inside, at least mostly. It made sense when he looked almost exactly like his mother, while his father had displayed his intelligence and battle tactics, seeming to favor speed if his short spar with Mikoto showed anything, much like himself. Going along that line of thought, Minato knew that he wouldn't interfere in his own child's love life unless it was dire or the situation called for it, and he was quite sure that Naruto would be the same. It was also good timing that his father arrived when he did. Perhaps he could help with Minato's thoughts were cut off as a sound he was intimately familiar with assaulted his ears. It was that of a sandal coming into contact with wood. Turning his head to the source of the sound, Minato noticed out of the corner of his eye that his father had picked up on the noise as well. Moments later, a figure jumped out from the trees to land in front of the father and son, much younger and shorter than both. Minato immediately relaxed once the person came into view. The subconscious tensing of his muscles was cancelled. The most notable thing about the person before him, that Naruto noticed, could be split between the hair and face. The hair was an incredibly noticeable shade of gray, quite unique, even in a world where there were people with green or pink hair. But while his spiky gray hair was unique, his face, however, was notable for a different reason altogether. A blue mask covered the lower half of the face while a forehead protector was tilted on his head so that it covered his left eye. Whether hiding some sort of physical scar or perhaps trying to make himself cool, Naruto didn't know what the tilted Hittite purpose was, only that his sense of balance must be impeccable to be able to leap through the trees at such a pace without misjudging a step. Looking closer, Naruto noticed a dark ring under the visible right eye, though whether a sign of nightmares or not sleeping enough was impossible to tell with shinobi. They were always on call. The teenager had a black t-shirt and pants on, with black sleeves that had metal arm protectors covering them. Leather straps also made their way around his back and chest. Once they had landed, the teenager had immediately snapped his gaze to Naruto for a second before he turned to his son. Hey, Minato-sensei, you got a minute? The newcomer asked. Of course, Kakashi, I've told you plenty of times that you can drop by any time you want, Minato told his former student. While taking up the position of Hokage didn't mean that one couldn't train a genin team, evidenced by both Tobirama Senju and Hiruzen Sarutobi, Minato had decided that he had trained Kakashi all he could, and that it was time for his student to grow on his own, even if he had worries about Kakashi's mental state. Ma, Kakashi replied. I know, I'm just being nice, but anyway, I heard that you were escorting around with a stranger to the village, so I wanted to come check them out. They must be pretty important for you to be walking them around. Naruto watched his son give a small smile at the young teenager's behavior, but noticed a tightening of the eyes to signify that the smile was forced. His son then gestured to him with a hand. Kakashi, this is Naruto, the man you heard about seeing me with. Naruto extended a hand for Kakashi to shake, which the younger male did. Both gave each other a nod before the hands were retracted. He is also my two-san. Kakashi's eyes widened at the information before they began to rove over Naruto, looking over him in a new light, analyzing him. Are you sure, Minato-sensei? Kakashi asked Minato when he turned back to the blonde. He could be like the others. Minato smiled. Don't worry, Kakashi, Naruto had given me evidence to prove his claim as my two-san, and many of his qualities have also been similar to my own," the blonde assured his former student. Kakashi may have been going to say something else, but he was cut off by a noise coming from the forest. "Kakashi! Where did you go? If can't find you, I'll walk around on my hands for 2 hours before I switch to one hand then dash." The loud ranting was then cut off as the source of the noise walked into the clearing. "Aha!" they shouted as they spotted the gray-haired teenager. "I found you, Kakashi, even after you suddenly began an impromptu race to see who would reach Minato-sama first. Such is the power of my youth." The figure then extended their hand, sticking it in a thumbs-up pose while giving a grin, which caused his extremely white teeth to sparkle. Dressed in a green jumpsuit with orange legwarmers, blue sandals, a green flak jacket and a hitai tied around his waist, the figure sported a bowl-style haircut and dark eyes. Naruto immediately began to wonder what the youth act meant. Had this new individual been dropped on his head? Was it part of some elaborate illusion to hide their real personality? Was it a family trait like hair color or a kekei genkai, or was it simply part of his personality? Kakashi sighed as Madogai made his appearance again. He would admit that the self-referred Ketakaki Aoimoju, sublime green beast of prey, was certainly skilled in taijutsu, and took some pleasure from watching Guy's reaction when he showed as little interest as possible in the man's challenges. When most would find Guy's personality disturbing, Kakashi was actually grateful for his presence. Though there were times when he would admit to simply wanting to be alone, he knew that Guy was probably one of the closest friends he had, not counting the relationship that he has with his sensei and his girlfriend. However, this was merely one of the times that he wanted to be alone, away from his friends, all of them. He had only actually come here because of his interest in seeing who his sensei was escorting around the village. It wasn't every day that the Hokage gave someone a tour of Konoha. "Hello, Guy." Minato greeted the youth enthusiast as he walked over. "Hello, Hokage-sama." Guy returned the greeting with twice the gusto. Guy may have been going to say something else, but Kakashi spoke before he could. "I'm sorry, Minato-sensei, but I have to go now," Kakashi told the group, moving to walk away. Minato frowned at his student's sudden departure. "Are you sure you don't want to stay? You only just got here." Kakashi merely gave his teacher an eye smile. "Nah, I have things to do today. I only came because I was interested in seeing who was with you." The gray-haired teenager excused before moving, now visibly quicker than before, to the tree line, though all of the three males noticed his less than subtle side glance over to the kanai-like monument. A few seconds after Kakashi disappeared, Minato turned to Guy, whose face had changed from moments ago. The once grinning visage had now become serious. "Guy, if you would follow him for a while, all this constant behavior is doing nothing for his health," the Hokage said. Guy merely gave a nod. "Of course, Hokage-sama." Then he was gone, off in the direction of Kakashi, making up for the lead the prodigy had on him. Naruto watched his son sigh and pinch the bridge of his nose. It seemed that Kakashi's actions weren't a recent thing. While admittedly curious about what was wrong with the teenager, Naruto kept his mouth shut. It was most likely not his place to ask. "Kakashi has gone through an incredibly traumatic time in the Third Shinobi War," Minato told his father in a lower tone, almost as if reading his thoughts, both hands returning to his sides. "He was put in incredibly stressful situations that he shouldn't have been in at a young age. Because of them, he's developed post-traumatic stress disorder." Minato gave another sigh. "He's also been having nightmares. He thinks that nobody knows, but we do. He's started to drive off his friends on occasion to wallow in his own grief." Minato looked off in the direction that his student went in. "I've been trying to help, but so far, nothing seems to work." "Why are you telling me this?" Naruto asked after a few moments of silence between them. "Because I want to see if you can get through to him," Minato said, turning towards his father. "You have lost, just like he has, and you're also the only one close enough to him to be able to get through to him." "Close enough to him?" Naruto echoed. "I just met him. How can I be close enough to him?" "You're the Tusan of his sensei," Minato said to him. "That's close enough that you could make a difference." "You forget that I've only known him for less than a minute, Minato," Naruto told his son. "It will take a closer bond than the one that is currently between myself and Kakashi for me to be able to do anything." "You don't need to have a close bond," Minato assured. "Simply tell him your story. Tell him what you did and how you wish that you had someone to talk to. Tell him that he is lucky to have people around him like he does." "You want me to lie?" Naruto questioned before he shook his head. "Never mind that, Minato. My story, as you've decided to call my life, is not something that I want to shout to the world, it's incredibly personal. I was a bit annoyed at Kushina telling it to her friend. What would make you think that I would be happy about telling to someone that I have met less than 5 minutes ago? Minato made a mental note to reprimand Kushina later for telling Mikoto his father's story without permission. Hopefully the Uchiha would have a bit more common sense about spreading his father's story. It's not lying, Minato told him. I just need you to alter a bit about how you dealt with it, and I know that I have no right to ask you to speak to anyone about your life, but please, Toussaint. Minato let out a breath. I need you to get Kakashi to open up, otherwise I'm going to have to go through with my other option. And that is? Naruto asked with a raised brow. I'm going to have to admit him into our village's ANBU corps, Minato said with a slight grimace. Why don't you just send Kakashi to the ANBU then? Why get me to talk to him? Naruto said to his son, who then began to explain. In the ANBU, they teach people to suppress their emotions, to help with undertaking stressful missions. Minato said to his father. I would hope to have this help ease Kakashi's pain, help him control his grief and self-loathing along with giving him a new direction in life, but I am not entirely sure if it would prove successful. He won't see a psychiatrist, he won't open to friends, he hides himself away. Minato sighed and shook his head. Will you talk to him, at least once, Toussaint? Okay, Naruto said after a moment of thought. But not now though, I will find him at a later time. Gai-san appeared to have taken off after him and I will not interrupt his attempts to get through to his friend. Minato's face showed him a smile, giving his father a hug, before pulling back. Thank you, Toussaint, Minato said gratefully. I know you didn't have to and that you didn't want to, but you did it anyway, thank you. I didn't do it anyway, Minato, Naruto told him. I did it for you. Me? Minato questioned. Why did you do it for me? Naruto gave his son a smile, resting a hand on his shoulder. Because I would do anything for my family, Minato, Naruto said sincerely. I agreed because I could hear in your voice how much Kakashi means to you, how much you valued him. Minato returned his father's smile. Thank you, Toussaint, Minato told his parent. It seems that he learned of another quality that he and his father shared. Both would do anything for the ones they loved. Once again, both father and son were back in the Hokage Tower, occupying the son's office as he did some paperwork that desperately needed to be finished with a personal touch. Both Kushina and Mikoto had split off from the pair earlier, both saying that they needed to do their own thing. Neither was saying anything, Minato with his head down, scribbling over several pages of paper, signing off on several things and denying several more. His father was leaning back in the chair on the opposite side of his son's desk, staring out the window that his son was seated in front of, watching as the sun dropped behind the horizon, basking in the last of the rays that the day had to offer. While he would have liked to talk more with his son, about what he had done in his life, how he was treated, about his experiences, he understood that his son also had a responsibility to his village, and had put off signing several important documents in order to take him on a tour of his home. Thus, he was relaxing, waiting for the moment where his son would be done, and they would be able to continue with their talk. Almost as if he could hear his father's thoughts, Minato lifted himself off of the desk with a groan, rolling his shoulders as he tried to work out the kinks that had developed from remaining hunched over a desk for so long. As moved around, the color of the sky drifting in from the window caught his attention, causing him to turn around fully as his brain began to process the color of the sky with the likely time. Releasing a groan, Minato turned back around to his father, who was now sitting up in his chair and paying attention. I didn't get you a place to stay. Minato let out a sigh as he rubbed the bridge of his nose in frustration. Naruto immediately made to put his son's mind at ease. It's fine, I'm sure there is place that I could rent a room at, Naruto said. A pub or hotel either is fine, you do not need to burden yourself any more than you already have with my well-being, Minato. No, Minato told his father. You're my Toussaint, I can't let you sleep in a hotel when there is family willing to take you in. You make it sound like I've been living on the street, Naruto said in a dry voice before speaking again in a normal tone. I've slept in worse places than a hotel bed, Minato, believe me. One night will not kill me. There is more than enough space for you to live in my house, Minato insisted before pausing and deciding to change tactics, speaking in a low voice. Please, Toussaint, for my peace of mind. That was all it took for Naruto to cave into his son's demands, expressing his surrender with a sigh. This prompted a grin from his son. You're evil, you know, Naruto said to the young man on the opposite side of the desk as he stood up from his chair, stretching as he did so. Minato also rose from his seat. So you say, but do you have any proof? Minato pointed out as they both moved to exit the room. Naruto chuckled as they walked down the stairs to the lower floors of the Hokage Tower, passing multiple offices. As they moved through the building, Naruto thought it prudent to ask a certain question. Where exactly do you live, Minato? Naruto asked his son. He knew that the position of Hokage gave one many benefits. That much he had managed to glean from Tobirama's position when the Nidaime managed to convince his council during the First Shinobi War to allow a complete unknown to help them. While a Hokage is obligated to live in at the Hokage residence, which is another building close to here, I'm allowed to live wherever I want. Minato told him as they finally exited the building and out into the darkening streets. There, he said, pointing to a building further away. That is where I'm meant to live. It's been simply coined the Hokage residence, and personally, I don't think I'll ever live there. The building is simply too big for me to use. I'd feel alone in such a place. I think I know how you feel, Naruto remarked as he gazed at the circular building. It seems more like a building for a family than one person. Because he was looking at the building, Naruto missed his son's eyes glaze over for a second. Yeah, a family, the Hokage muttered lowly. Shaking himself out his self-induced stupor, Minato began to move once more after placing a hand on his father's shoulder, a signal to continue walking. I actually live in a small apartment in the shinobi district of the village. It isn't the most extravagant of homes, but it's a place to rest my head. That's all it has to be in the end, Minato, Naruto said to his son as they walked through the streets of Konoha as the darkness of the night began to take hold. That it does, Minato agreed as they walked. It took them several minutes of walking through the quiet streets, occasionally interrupted by a person waving towards them when they recognized their current Hokage. The time it took to make it to Minato's apartment was made quicker with the use of chatter between the two, Naruto questioning Minato about several aspects of his life and Minato doing the same until they finally came up to an unremarkable building in an unremarkable street. There was nothing that differentiated this street from the one next to it, other than perhaps a different shade of paint given to the building by the owners. Naruto didn't know what to expect when he saw his son's home, but he didn't quite expect something that seemed so plain. Opening the door to the building that housed his apartment, Minato let his father through before closing the door behind him. All it took was walking up a flight of stairs before Naruto found himself outside of his son's home. Well, Minato said, suddenly feeling quite nervous about letting his father see his home. Here it is. With those words, Minato leaned over to grasp the handle of the door, pumping chakra into the near-invisible seals on the handle before opening the door, allowing it to swing open and admit his father first. The apartment had a homey feel to it. Naruto could tell as soon as he walked in the door. It felt like someone had taken time to turn this place into a home instead of simply a place to rest one's head, like Minato had told him. There was a kitchen off to the side with a dining table close by for meals, and on the other side of the room, there was a lounge with 2 chairs and a coffee table for people to relax and a hallway that led further into the apartment. Naruto heard Minato shut the door behind him as he moved further into the apartment. Looking around, Naruto noticed several picture frames on the wall, and went to take a closer look at those in the photographs. One, Naruto noticed, was of Minato when he was very young, perhaps around 10 or so, with 2 other children his age, and a man that Naruto recognized, an older version, Jiraiya. Taking a close look at his son's face, Naruto could see the small twinkle in his eye that spoke about how happy he was in the picture. That's a picture of my genin team, Minato told him when he noticed what his father was looking at. That picture was taken just after my team completed the final genin test. It was one of the happiest days of my life. You look happy too, Naruto said, still looking at the picture before moving on to the next one, this one of Minato when he was significantly older. His son was in the middle of 3, he'd assume, genin, his 2 hands on top of the 2 young males of the group, tussling their hair while a girl was in between them. He easily recognized one of the boys to be a younger version of Kakashi, but the other 2 were a complete mystery. That's the genin team that I led, Minato narrated from behind him. You already met Kakashi Hatake. The other boy is Obito Uchiha while the girl's name is Rin Noera. Naruto could sense the sadness in his son's voice when he spoke of the last 2. I'm guessing that Obito and Rin are no longer alive, Naruto asked softly. Minato's silence washed his answer. I see, and Kakashi must think it is his own fault for this, correct? Once again, silence was his only answer. Is it really his fault, or is he blaming himself for circumstances that were out of his control? This time, Naruto got an answer from his son. Neither of them are Kakashi's fault, as much as he would like to believe it was. Kakashi himself will tell you of the circumstances if he wishes to when you talk to him," Minato told him. "I still don't know what you expect me to be able to achieve by speaking to him, Minato," Naruto said to his son, turning around from the picture frames. "He's more likely to ignore me than actually listen. He has no respect for me. He's more likely to respect a random civilian picked off the streets than me." "I know," Minato replied. "But if there is even the slightest chance that he will listen to you, I want to take it. Sending him to the ANBU isn't my preference, but it's the only option I have available if he doesn't change." "Minato," another voice in the apartment echoed out. "Minato, who are you talking to?" Footsteps came from the hallway and into the lounge area that Minato and Naruto were in. "Minato? In here!" Minato called out to the person, but Naruto didn't need to wait for the person to come out from the hall to be able to see them. He had spent almost the majority of the day with the owner. Walking into the room dressed in a deep blue gown was Kushina, red hair hanging freely behind her head. Upon seeing her boyfriend's father in the same room as her, while she was wearing a nightgown, Kushina let out an eep before moving out back into the hallway, out of Naruto's sight, with a red face. "Minato!" she hissed out after a few minutes, giving Minato and his father enough time to settle their chuckles over the Uzumaki's behavior. Giving his father one last look of amusement at his girlfriend's reaction, Minato moved over to the hallway, where he was promptly dragged out of Naruto's sight, but unfortunately for Kushina, not out of his hearing range. "What do you think you're doing?" Naruto heard Kushina try to whisper to his son but fail at containing her voice. "I just walked out in front of your Tusen wearing nothing by a robe. A little warning next time, Minato baka." Naruto heard his son give his girlfriend a chuckle. "It's alright, Kushina," he heard his son say, trying to calm down the redhead. "I highly doubt that Tusen dash." His son's words were cut off by a whack, followed by an ouch. "Kushina! What was that for? Don't you dare say Tusen won't care, Kushina!" Naruto heard Kushina mock Minato's voice. "Because if you do, I swear to Kami, you'll get a first-hand reminder of why I was called a Kai Chishio no Habanero, red-hot-blooded habanero, during the academy." Kushina hissed again, before letting out a sigh, and speaking in a softer and more vulnerable tone. "Minato, please, I'm truly worried. What if he doesn't like me? What if he makes you choose between me and him? I know how much you wanted your parents' dash. We both know what my answer would be should Tusen ask me that, which I doubt. Trust me, Kushina, Naruto isn't going to make me choose between you and him, I can tell that much." Deciding to help his son out, as well as put Kushina's mind at ease, Naruto made his presence known by walking to the entrance of the hallway and leaning one of the walls. "You know, Kushina, you could have just asked me what I thought of you." His voice caused the eyes of the other two occupants of the hallway to snap towards him. "And Naruto, I dash." The Uzumaki tried to stutter out some words, but Naruto held up his hand to forestall any more attempts at speaking properly. He noticed Minato simply standing beside his girlfriend, not looking like he was going to step in but instead, waiting to see what happens. "Kushina, I know you have your fears about whether I like you or not as a person, and if I think you're good enough for my son," Naruto told her. "Truthfully, I think that you could stand to mature a little, or at the very least think a bit more before acting." He could see Kushina flinch slightly as he pointed out some of her flaws, while Minato remained motionless, though Naruto noticed the slight tensing of his jaw when Kushina flinched. "However, you are a beautiful young woman, with a strong personality and a stronger spirit." A smile graced Naruto's features as he continued to speak. "Much like Minato's Kaa-san, I see quite a bit of her in you, Kushina. But most importantly, you make my son happy where I could not, and for that I will be eternally grateful to you. Whatever kind of blessing, approval or permission you need from me, Kushina, you have it." Naruto's words brought a bright smile to Kushina's face and tears to gather in her eyes. Sniffing a bit, Kushina launched herself at him, arms wrapping around him in an embrace that he returned to the redhead. With her head leaning on his shoulder, Naruto could easily hear the sniffles that Kushina let escape her lips every now and then as she tried to hold back tears. "Thank you," he heard her whisper in his ear, her voice letting him know how much it meant. "Thank you so much, I won't ever be able to repay you. Just continue to make my son happy, Kushina, that's all you have to do," Naruto whispered back. Finally pulling back after several moments and holding Kushina at arm's length, hands on her shoulders, Naruto spoke to her again. "Perhaps one day you'll be calling me Tusen," Naruto teased, expecting her to become red in the face, but her face paled slightly instead. Kushina then took a step back, out of his grip and returning to her former position by Minato, all the while giving a nervous chuckle. His son had also gone a bit pale. You unwell, ah? Kushina fumbled over words for a bit before turning to Minato. Tell him, she told the Hokage, who spluttered slightly at the sudden demand. Hang on, why do I have to tell him? Minato asked, which the wrong answer was apparently as Kushina squared her shoulders and any sort of nervousness vanished in an instant, replaced by irritation. Because you're the boyfriend, Databane. She told him as if he was an idiot for not seeing it first. Besides, it's completely your fault for putting us in this situation. My fault? Minato spluttered again. You didn't exactly say no. Minato replied. So you wanted me to say no dash. Kushina's response was cut off when Naruto intervened in the arguing. Could one of you just tell me what's going on? Naruto questioned the arguing duo, causing them both to shoot each other looks, before Kushina narrowed her eyes and tilted her head in his direction, causing Minato to sigh before turning to look at Naruto. Well, Tusan, the thing is... Minato then paused for a second before a prod from Kushina's elbow spurred him on. Kushina is kind of my fiancé. Naruto blinked once, twice, then a third time and a fourth time, his face that of shock with his eyes wide and his lips parted slightly. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Naruto shook himself out of the shock he was in, his face immediately setting into a deadpan expression. Where's the guest room? He asked. Down the hall. The door on the left is Kushina's and my own, straight ahead is the bathroom and the one on the right is the guest room. Almost immediately after that was said, Naruto began to move down the hall towards his temporary room. Tusan? Minato asked, a little put out at his father's reaction to the sudden news. While he knew it wasn't negative, it wasn't positive either. Naruto didn't answer. Instead, Kushina and Minato were treated to the elderly man's mutterings. Minato's getting married. Why would he be getting married? He's too young? There was a momentary pause in the man's mutterings before they continued. He got her pregnant, that's it. Stupid idiot didn't use protection. This is what I get for not being in Minato's life. No one probably gave him the talk. Must be why he didn't use protection. Boys his age don't usually want kids. Naruto's voice became annoyed. Great, now I'll have to do it. The one thing I wasn't looking forward to, just great. I just hope they have a banana. I really don't want to be a test dummy. With those final words, Naruto reached the door to the room he was staying in, opened it, and then closed it after walking. It took all Kushina's will not to burst out laughing, despite the seriousness of Naruto's response, as Minato's face turned cherry red, but even she could hold back several snorts that managed to escape. Tusan! Minato yelled out after managing to get his blood flow under control. I've already has the talk. Oh, thank Kami! Naruto called from the other room. Both Kushina and Minato could hear the genuine relief in Naruto's voice as he spoke, as if he had been saved from some great evil. Kushina finally lost the battle against her laughter, and it rang out into the night. The morning came too quickly in Naruto's opinion. He swore that he only just put his head down on the mattress of the guest room before he was awoken by light shining on his face through the windows and the smell of food coming from another part of the apartment. He slowly rolled over and pulled himself off the bed, taking a second to change his clothes with a spare set and one of the scrolls attached to his waist. Naruto then opened the door and moved out into the apartment. Walking out into the largest area in his son's home, Naruto was greeted to the sight of his son standing in front of the stove in the kitchen, cooking eggs in a fry pan, while Kushina was sitting down at the dining table. Both were dressed already in the same uniforms he had seen them in yesterday. Minato noticed his presence first, giving him a smile as he walked over to the table, sitting opposite his soon-to-be daughter-in-law, the red-headed woman spotting him as he approached. Morning, Tusan, the blonde said, seemingly forgetting about last night's conversation. Kushina, on the other hand, seemed to be painfully aware of the subject of the conversation, refusing to meet Naruto's eyes, instead keeping her gaze on the part of the table directly in front of her. After returning his son's greeting, and a couple of minutes passing with a slowly build-up of tension, Naruto finally decided to address the topic that would eventually come up. Kushina, he called to the Uzumaki woman, prompting her to lift her head. I want to offer my apologies about last night. No, it's okay, Kushina insisted, shaking her head. I know that it might seem that we're going too fast, but that's not it at all. Naruto interrupted. When I didn't give a response yesterday, it was mostly out of shock. Naruto gave a small sigh before continuing on. 2 days ago, Whenever I thought of Minato, I would always imagine a small boy who would love to climb trees. I thought that I had changed that view of him, but apparently not. I know that Minato isn't the same little boy that he once was, but that's all I truly know him as. It will take time for me to see him as otherwise completely. Naruto then gave a smile to Kushina before turning to Minato, who had stopped his cooking of the eggs. Make no mistake, Minato, I am very happy for you and Kushina and hope that you both have each other for the rest of your lives. I approve of your marriage, Naruto told the couple. Much like the night before, Kushina's eyes began to water as Naruto voiced his approval. Minato's eyes dampened slightly as well along with his fiancée. Naruto placed his hand over Kushina's and gave the hand a squeeze of comfort, the Uzumaki giving him a smile in return. Thank you, Kushina said, her eyes still watering. Your blessing means a lot to us. It's fine, Kushina, Naruto assured the redhead as she began to pull herself back together. She wasn't usually this emotional, but she had been stressing over the approval of Minato's father as soon as she realized who the man was. To find out that the man was happy about their relationship, knowing the full extent of it, made her feel like an immense weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Naruto then turned to look at Minato, who was carrying 3 plates over to the table, each with toast and eggs, along with a platter of fruit. After everyone had been given their plate, and the platter placed in the middle of the table, Minato sat down next to his fiancée and the table descended into silence as the trio began to eat their meals. Several minutes passed and Naruto decided to start a conversation. Having already finished his own meal and with Minato and Kushina about to finish theirs, Naruto decided to speak after pushing his plate forward slightly with his cutlery resting on said plate. Minato and Kushina finishing moments later and doing the same. Thank you for breakfast, Minato. It was lovely. Minato's face colored slightly under his father's praise. It was nothing too san. Minato told his father. I couldn't let you go hungry now, could I? No, I suppose that wouldn't have been very nice, Naruto said with a slight chuckle, before continuing the conversation. So, do the two of you have a date planned for when you get married? As soon as he asked the question, Naruto got the feeling he was treading on slightly unstable ground with his query. Both Minato and Kushina exchanged a look, seeming to have a silent conversation, before the male of the two spoke up. Well, we don't really have anything planned, Minato said to Naruto's surprise. Why not? Naruto asked. Well, Minato shifted uncomfortably before talking. I proposed about a year ago, when I felt that the Third Shinobi War was going to end, and while I knew that we wouldn't get married during the Shinobi War, I didn't expect to become so famous after the fighting stopped. Becoming Hokage wasn't really on my mind when I proposed. Minato seemed to pause here and Kushina took over, her face showing annoyance. With Minato as Hokage, anyone close to him becomes a target to someone with a grudge, she huffed. Minato-kun here is afraid that I might be hurt by people looking to go after him if it becomes common knowledge that we're married. He underestimates me, she said in annoyance. Now you know that's not true, Minato told her. I don't underestimate your skills, Kushina, I just care about you. Why don't you just sign the paperwork to say you're married? Naruto asked, stopping Kushina from speaking and causing an argument to erupt. To Naruto's surprise, Kushina colored red slightly before speaking. Minato gained a smile on his face and wrapped an arm around her back, pulling her against him. She managed to pull herself out of his grip, her face still slightly red as she finally answered. That would actually be my fault, she said a bit meekly. Ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to have this beautiful wedding ceremony and get walked down the aisle. Kushina's face flushed again when Minato gave a small chuckle. Don't worry, he told Kushina, pulling her against him. Kushina then buried her face into his side. I don't think any less of you for wanting that. But it's my fault, she mumbled into his side. If I didn't want a wedding ceremony, then we would be married right now. That's true, Minato said. But then it's also my fault for wanting to give you that ceremony, even after you said that it no longer mattered. Kushina then embraced her future groom, sighed on. I love you, she told him, her face pressed against him. I love you too, Minato replied as he held her with one arm. Naruto watched the happy couple embrace each other with a smile. It was plain to see that both were completely happy with the other and both were ready to spend the rest of their lives with the other, despite their somewhat young age. Can't you do it in secret somehow? Naruto questioned, unfortunately ending to moment between his son and his fiancée. Get someone to set up a wedding under a different name, and then leaving to go to it? Minato shook his head with a sigh. There is still the monk. While I would trust them to remain silent if someone asked them about who they did the wedding for, I wouldn't trust them to remain silent under torture. Toussaint, you underestimate the kind of fear that I have inspired in people. Minato said in a sad tone. I killed an entire platoon of IWA ninja for Konoha. That kind of power inspired a lot of anger and fear, in Iwabikure especially. If there is even an inkling that I am getting married, they will most likely pounce on it. The only other people who know about our engagement are notable ninja, Toussaint. Minato continued. It would be instantly suspicious if one of them was spotted organizing a wedding, even more so if they had no known relationship. If this knowledge went to anyone who found it worthy of investigating further, all they would have to do would be to bribe the planner to tell them where the wedding is taking place, and they would know. Minato gave a sigh and rubbed Kushina's back. Perhaps after the war is over and all the hype over my deeds has retreated, maybe then we can get married. Naruto let his mind wander, trying to think up a solution to his son's problem. Not only would this make his son, and soon-to-be daughter-in-law, incredibly happy, but it would be the first notable event in Minato's life that he would be attending after reuniting with his son. As his mind went over multiple plans, almost all of them shot down in some way or another, and the other being completely ridiculous, a thought formed that quickly became a plan that made it through multiple scenarios that Naruto applied it over. Minato, the genjutsu-wearing man said, causing the natural blonde to focus on him. What if I did it? When Kushina straightened up at his question and Minato motioned for him to elaborate, Naruto continued. Currently, not many people know me as your Toussaint, correct? Minato gave a hesitant nod. Well, there is Kakashi, Mikoto, and the ANBU that were in the room when you arrived. Kakashi most likely wouldn't have told anyone, at least not straight away. Minato said as he began thinking. He might lord it over Guy for a week or two, knowing why you're so important that I would escort you around the village, before letting Guy know, but that's if Guy asks. Mikoto might tell her husband, Fugaku, but she should keep quiet about it until I make a formal announcement to the village that you're related to me. The ANBU won't say a word, they all know better than to talk about anything that they do once they don their masks. Other than that, none should know. Why? What are you planning? Well, Naruto began. I was just thinking that, what if I got the wedding supplies, sealed them into a few scrolls, took them somewhere to set up the wedding, and then you arrived later? Naruto proposed. I could take the place of a monk, it shouldn't take long to memorize most of what I'm meant to say. The only problem I can see is you being able to arrive in time as well as get back before anyone notices. Naruto watched as Minato began to think over the plan, Kushina doing the same with furrowed brows. If several things are ironed out, I don't see why not. Minato said after several moments of thought. I could direct you to a store here in Konoha that can supply you with wedding supplies, but do you have a place to set up the wedding at? Looking at his father, Minato watched as indecision passed through his eyes for several seconds. Whatever it was, Minato could see that his father was arguing with himself over something that involved a place for the wedding. For several bone-chilling moments, Minato entertained the idea that Naruto was going to lead himself and Kushina into a trap that would end in their deaths. That train of thought was quickly crushed just as his father reached the end of his internal argument. Yes, he told them simply. I do. Where is it? Minato inquired, wanting to know more about the place that his father would be taking them and to satisfy the nagging voice in his head that he was going to be led into a trap. It's a secret. Naruto told them with a smile. And it will be perfect, I promise. It didn't satisfy the voice, but his father's smile put it at ease slightly. He could feel the sincerity in the act. I will get the supplies today if I can. Naruto told them. I'll set off later today. The quicker this happens, the less of a chance of someone finding out about it. A small frown appears on his forehead. I still don't know how you're going to get there and back without raising suspicions. His question seemed to amuse Minato and Kushina greatly, judging by the look they gave each other and the one they gave him. Toussaint, did you not look up as to why I became famous? Minato questioned his father, who shrugged at the question. Not exactly, I was more focused on getting to you than actually finding out why your name was so well known. I know that you fought against IWA and were one of the main reasons that Konoha won the war. I think I heard something about you moving incredibly fast. Naruto told his son as he thought back to find out why his son was as famous as he was. Minato gave a small chuckle. Not exactly, Toussaint, Minato said. Naruto's son then reached around to the small of his back, before pulling back this time holding a bulkier version of a kunai, with 3 prongs. The middle of the 3 prongs was longer than the 2 attached to the side. The handle was also thicker than a regular kunai with a kind of script for Fuinjutsu wrapped around it. Minato placed it in the middle of the table where Naruto quickly picked it up and began to study the many seals inscribed on the handle, turning it over in his hand. It is called Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God Technique. Minato explained as Naruto continued to examine the inscriptions on the handle of the tri-pronged kunai. It allows me to transport myself instantly to a location marked by the Fuinjutsu script around the handle. And by placing them on a projectile, you have the ability to teleport to anywhere you throw one of this kunai. Naruto finished, seeing what his son had accomplished. It's remarkable, Minato. Naruto told him, while putting the kunai back down in the middle of the table. I assume that you want me to take one of this kunai, and then somehow signal you to tell you that everything is prepared? Correct. Minato said before continuing. But you don't need to worry about signaling me. If you channel some chakra into the handle and then throw it, I'll feel a kind of buzz in the back of my mind that tells me one of my kunai has been thrown and be able to teleport myself and Kushina to your location, wherever you are. Are you sure? Naruto asked, somewhat hesitantly. The place that I have in mind is quite far away. Would you be able to make it the distance? Minato shook his head. Distance is not a problem. The amount of chakra for the jump between each kunai is always the same. Minato told his father, but not elaborating on how that was. Naruto didn't push his son, knowing that he would always have his secrets, just like Naruto would have his. Make sure that you signal that you're ready at the beginning of the day so that I can call for a day off for myself and Kushina. While our engagement is secret, our boyfriend-girlfriend relationship isn't. If both of us called for the day off, most would think that we would be having day by ourselves. Minato said to his father, ironing out the details. I will, Minato. Naruto replied, beginning to get up, Kushina and Minato doing the same. The 2 of you merely need to be ready when I call. Naruto then turned towards the door before turning back. I'll get the supplies now. The quicker this happens, the less of a chance there is of anyone finding out and it getting ruined. Walking around the table, Naruto gave both his son and future daughter-in-law a hug, not quite feeling as if his relationship had progressed far enough for him to do anything more. Moving to the door and opening it, Naruto was forced to turn around when his son called him. To-san. Turning around, Naruto caught the object that was lazily thrown in his direction. Getting a good look at it proved it to be one of Minato's tri-pronged kunai. You almost forgot that, Minato said when Naruto raised his head. Thank you, Minato. Naruto replied as he held the object, tucking it into his sleeve so that no one would see it until he could put it somewhere safe. Once again, he said as he stepped outside the doorway, ready to close the door as he left. Congratulations on your engagement, Minato. I'm sure that your Ka-san is watching wherever she is with a smile. I know that she would be proud of the man that you have become. A smile made its way to Minato's face as he thought about making his mother proud. Thank you, To-san, that means a lot. Minato thanked his father for his words, while his father gave him a smile. You don't need to thank me, Minato. I need to thank you for turning into such a man. You have truly made me the happiest To-san in the world by turning out as you have. The disguised man said to the blonde. Kushina. He addressed the redhead. Thank you supporting my son when I could not. It's nothing, Naruto, she said with a similar smile that was being worn by her future husband. Thank you for accepting me. Naruto gave her a nod before talking to the both of them. I shall see you both in the future, on the day of your wedding, the black-haired man said. And don't be late, Minato, he added as a parting comment as he closed the door. I don't think Kushina would like you if you did. The Uzumaki's smile seemed to suddenly become a bit too sweet. Don't worry, Kushina assured Naruto. Now that I'm having my wedding, I'll make sure that Minato-kun and I arrive right on time. The last thing that Naruto saw as he closed the door was a still smiling Kushina turned to a suddenly nervous Minato. Right, Minato-kun? Naruto chuckled as the door to the apartment closed, and he made his way to the ground floor and out of the building. He couldn't help but shake his head at Kushina's behavior. Just like Minami, he muttered before walking down the street, towards his destination. But it was only down the street that something hit Naruto. They didn't tell me where the shop was. Chapter 18. Minato Namikaze was a man not easily scared or unnerved. He'd seen more than enough death and bloodshed during the Third Shinobi War, and he had more blood than he would like on his hands. He'd kept his cool, even after committing one of the most notable actions of his ninja career, and of the Third Shinobi War, his slaughtering of a platoon of IWA shinobi in Kunoichi, walking out of the bloodbath with a hard, emotionless face. He had never been nervous or scared then. But as he stood out in the lounge room of his apartment in Konoha, he could feel the kind of nervousness, the kind of anticipation, that he had first felt when he knew he was going to get his first taste of real-life combat. His father had finally thrown the tri-pronged kunai that he had given him before he left Konoha over a month ago. Now he stood waiting for Kushina to finish doing whatever it was that she was doing, most likely double-checking that she had everything, before the two of them flashed to his father's location. Both of them had bought formal clothes for the wedding, not being allowed to buy actual wedding clothes without attracting unwanted attention. Minato had bought a black hakama to go with a black kimono that would have a white trimming around the collar. He also had a black haori with white around the cuffs on the sleeves and rim. He had no idea what Kushina had bought, both of them having agreed to keep what they were wearing a secret until they were about to be wed. As he waited for Kushina, Minato thought about the place that his father had thrown his kunai from. He knew that wherever Naruto was, it was towards the northeast, around the land of lightning and the land of frost, closer to Shimagakure, village hidden in the frost, than to Kumo. This did nothing to quell the nerves and thoughts that betrayed his trust of his father. Is Naruto part of Kumo? His mind said, as it began to doubt all of the trust that Naruto had brought up. Kumo was always interested in Kushina for her lineage. Perhaps they found out that we were dating, or even engaged. This could all be some elaborate trap. Naruto is close enough to Kumo that he could be at some sort of hidden base. It might even be Kumo and IWA joining forces. Kumo found out that Kushina and I were together, and decided to ask Iwagakure if they wanted to be part of the trap that caught the yellow flash. Minato snapped himself out of those thoughts. He had no reason to believe that Naruto, his father, was working against him or Konoha. Naruto had his secrets, that much Minato could tell, but so did he. He couldn't expect his father to tell him everything when he wouldn't either, though whether he wouldn't tell his father his own secrets out of lack of trust or his instincts as a shinobi had yet to be confirmed. He could only hope that Naruto's secrets, whatever they may be, wouldn't endanger his village, because he knew that it would be on his head that the axe fell if that happened. Minato-kun. The sound of Kushina's voice brought Minato out of his inner thoughts. Shaking his head to clear away the lingering thoughts, Minato turned to Kushina, who was clad in her shinobi outfit, just as he was in his. On her side was a sealing scroll, similar to the one that he had at his, holding her clothing. Yes, Kushina-chan? Minato asked. What's wrong? Kushina questioned, as she came up to her fiancé, taking a hold of his hand, her voice full of concern. Your brow is furrowed and you have a slight frown. That only happens when you think of things that trouble you. Her voice then changed from concern to disapproval. You know that you're not allowed to think of anything negative today. We're going to get married and I won't let it be ruined because you were grumpy, Databane. Minato chuckled at his soon-to-be wife's attitude. Sorry, Kushina-chan, I promise it won't happen again. Minato moved his arms to encircle the red-headed woman, who allowed herself to be pulled into the blonde's arms. You better. She mumbled, all her disapproval gone as she was held in her love's arms. Is this really happening? She questioned softly after a few moments of silence. Are we really going to marry? She looked up at Minato, who only smiled at her. Of course we are. Minato told her. But I think that we should get going. It's almost 10 o'clock. Toussaint might think we're not coming. He told her jokingly. Ha ha. She deadpanned. You do know that if your Toussaint packs up the wedding things when we get there, I'm blaming you. Do you want to know the kind of pain I'll give you if you make me miss my wedding? Kushina asked, the last part being said sweetly. Minato immediately paled, recognizing the tone. Oh, of course, Kushina-chan. He stuttered slightly. Let's go. Much better. Kushina chirped as the both disappeared in a flash of yellow. When Minato reappeared, he felt his body instinctively tense up, his ingrained reactions ignoring his conscious belief that he would come to no harm. His eyes quickly surveyed the room, locating potential enemies, yet finding nothing besides stone walls. A cough from behind drew Minato's attention, causing him to spin around, inadvertently dragging Kushina, who was still in his grip, with a yelp. Instead of the hostile shinobi that his body expected, he found his father, dressed in long black pants and a white kimono and standing in front of the only entrance to the room. Welcome, his father said with a smile, perhaps missing his body's natural reaction, though the slight glimmer of sadness in his eyes that Minato managed to catch before it disappeared said otherwise. Minato, Kushina, you are right on time. Where are we? Kushina asked as she moved out of her fiancé's arms and looked around the barren stone room. Minato couldn't help but wonder the same question, call it a gut feeling, but he could sense that they weren't in some uninhabited building that his father had stumbled across, but rather a place that was quite close to black-haired man's heart. You are in a monastery, Naruto answered. High on a mountain near the border of Kaminari no Kuni and Shimo no Kuni. This place has been practically abandoned for some time. No one will be able to know that we are here. What do you mean when you say practically? Minato questioned. Is there anyone that comes here? Minato saw his father gain a sad smile as he responded to his question. No, I've been the only one to come here for some time. Kushina could hear the sorrow in Naruto's voice that spoke of loss and immediately tried to change the subject. So, Naruto, where are we meant to go? The Uzumaki said, clapping her hands together as she spoke. The change in subject worked. Naruto's tone became absent of the sadness that had gripped it before. I assume that you both have your own formal clothes? At Kushina's nod, Naruto continued. Good, in that case, Minato, you can get changed outside. Kushina, I will wait outside for when you are ready. Why do I have to get changed outside? Minato asked as he moved out of the room with his father. It was only once outside, and in a long corridor, that Naruto spoke. So that you are prepared for when Kushina arrives, Naruto told him. If you are outside, you can get changed and then be ready, or would you like Kushina to walk down the aisle and find you not there because you got lost on the way? The closest room to this one is in the opposite direction of the altar. Minato whitened at the implication before conceding to Naruto's point. Good, now remember, walk down the corridor, Naruto said, pointing towards one end of the passageway that they were in. Then turn right, right again, then left. Once you've done that, follow the corridor. You'll know when you get there. Okay. Minato nodded, showing he understood. Right, left then straight. With that, Minato moved to walk down the part of the corridor that his father pointed to when he stopped and turned around. After the wedding is over, could tell me why this place? The blonde asked. You must have a reason for taking us here. Naruto gave Minato a pained smile. After the wedding, I don't want to ruin your big day. Giving his father a nod in acceptance, Minato moved down the corridor, towards his destination. Looking at the walls as he moved through the monastery, Minato took a moment to think about where he was. There were very few abandoned monasteries in the world, especially ones that looked as whole as this one did. Pausing for a moment to study the walls, Minato immediately noticed that the stone didn't look as worn as it should. While not as knowledgeable as his predecessor, the Sandaime, when it came to the history of the elemental nations, Minato knew that it had definitely been a while since any monasteries had been made. Their often isolated positions were replaced with the more modern temples. While not knowing the exact date, Minato was reasonably sure that the most recent monastery that had been built was in Iwagakure roughly a millennium ago. Minato shook his head. This must be one of his father's secrets, one that he would hopefully be privy to after his wedding. Quickly moving the directions that his father had left him with, Minato found himself at the end of a corridor that had several white strips of cloth obscuring what was behind it. Moving forward with some trepidation, he stretched his hand out and moved the cloth to one side. Almost immediately, he was captured by the view. It was perfect. Kushina would love it. Naruto didn't know how long he waited for Kushina to be finished changing into her clothing. It might have been 5 minutes, it might have been 20. He was too busy thinking to truly care. When he had first arrived here, the first thing that he had done was to visit his family, mother and brother included. He had visited his mother and brother first, greeting them with a hello, filling them in on what happened when he met his son and all that his offspring had achieved, along with his engagement with a member of the Uzumaki clan. It had all been normal. But when he went to visit the grave of his wife, his gaze then fell on spot that Konan's grave occupied, or should it be possible grave. With the revelation that Minato had lived through the encounter with the ninja from the Land of Sky, Naruto's mind immediately began to wonder if Konan had done the same. While Konan didn't have what he suspected Minato of having, there was still the possibility that she had, by some miracle, survived the Sky Nin's assault. As he began to think about, before the grave of Minami, one single inconstancy rose to the forefront of his mind. The burns, the ones that had been along the trees, seemed too numerous. While Minami had been fit for a civilian, she had nowhere near the physical endurance of ninja. As painful as it was to think about, the ninja should have been able to slip behind Minami and slit her throat without issue, along with that of Minato and Konan, so why had jutsu been used? As he thought about it, Minato could only come to one conclusion: someone else had been in that clearing, another ninja, one that he had missed when he had spread out his senses to search for Minato and Konan. They must have encountered Minami when she was fleeing from the Skynin. They had a short fight with the other ninja, before Minami was hit with the explosive tag that was attached to the kunai. There was still a chance that Konan had been incinerated within the explosion that had also claimed her mother, but there was also a chance, a small one, that the shinobi may have taken Konan, for whatever reason. Whether he thought she had potential to become a powerful ninja for their village, or for some other sick reason that Naruto refused to think about, there was still the chance that she was alive. Unfortunately, like Minato, it was almost impossible to tell where she was. Too long had passed since she was taken. She could be anywhere in the elemental nations and beyond. He could only pray that, like Minato, he might hear of her doing some sort of notable deed. Naruto! Kushina broke Naruto from his thoughts as she exited the room. I'm done! The redhead was wearing pure white kimono that went down to her feet and was lined with sky blue. Her hair was flowing freely down her back and a sky blue cloth closed her kimono. All in all, she looked like the perfect bride for his son. You look amazing, Kushina! Naruto told her with a smile on his face. Kushina blushed at the compliment. Like a princess. Thank you, Naruto, it means a lot to hear you say that. Kushina replied truthfully. Naruto then motioned with his hand towards one end of the corridor that the room exited to. Let's go, Minato is waiting for us at the altar, Naruto said, but before they could move, Kushina interjected. Oh, she exclaimed. I almost forgot. What about Minato-kun's kunai and the sealing scroll containing my other clothes? She asked, motioning back to the room. Naruto merely waved her off. Don't worry, it will be there when you get back. For now, just focus on the wedding. Naruto's words seemed to bring up a slight panic in Kushina before she took a deep breath to steady herself. Okay, she said. Let's go. With that, both Kushina and Naruto began to move down the hall towards Minato, but Naruto immediately noticed that Kushina get taking sneaking glances at him, and seemed to be saddened by something. It was only when they reached the end of the corridor, about to take the first right, that Naruto stopped. What's wrong, Kushina? He asked the Uzumaki. Kushina seemed to realize that she'd been caught but tried to downplay it. Nothing's wrong, Kushina said, lying convincingly. No, something is wrong. Naruto pushed, hoping Kushina would tell him what. You can tell me anything, Kushina. After today, we'll be family after all. Naruto's pleading seemed to break through whatever resistance that Kushina tried to put up. She slumped before speaking. Remember when I told you that I wanted a wedding ceremony? Kushina asked him. Naruto nodded before he remembered the other part of what she had said to him. You want your Two-san here to walk you down the aisle, don't you? Naruto said softly, getting a nod from the Uzumaki woman. Kushina, if you had said that you wanted your Two-san here dash. No, that's not it. Kushina interrupted before she shook her head and spoke again. Well, partly. The redhead released a sigh before she continued. My Two-san died a long time ago, and while that's partly why I'm sad, it's not the complete reason. At the beginning of the Third Shinobi War, my Ka-san, the leader of Uzushiogakure, sent me to Konoha to keep me safe. Kushina spat out the last word like it was a foul poison. She sent there, as a young girl, when I knew no one. I was 13, and she took me away from my family, and dumped me in some place that I'd never been to before. The fact that I was teased almost instantly for my red hair didn't help. Kushina paused to sniff a bit before continuing. I idolized my Ka-san growing up. She was the leader of a village, how could I not? But she ripped me from her and pushed me out on my own. I cried, I begged and I pleaded for her to take me back. I sent letters to her, telling her how people teased me, but she sent nothing back. The Uzumaki woman lowered her head to the ground and didn't say anything more after that. You resent your Ka-san for splitting up your family and sending you away. Naruto concluded softly. But now you wish that she was here for your wedding, don't you? To see her smiling at you as you walked down the aisle. Yes. The answer came out as a croak, Kushina obviously struggling to hold back tears. Naruto released a sigh before speaking. It is too late for her to be able to come here. Naruto told her, this obviously did nothing to help console woman in any way. But it is not too late for your Ka-san to be able to be a part of your life once more. Talk to her, reconnect with her, what you're holding on to happened a long time ago. You must move past it if you are to ever be able to look your Ka-san in the eye. The words of the black-haired man seemed to help the redhead slightly. Kushina looked up, tears gathering in her eyes. Do you think it'll work? She sniffed. Only if you try. Naruto replied. But that is for another day. Today, you're getting married. It is a time for celebration, not sorrow. He smiled, causing Kushina to do the same. The Uzumaki gave a small smile and wiped her eyes of the gathering tears. You're right, she said to Naruto. I got angry at Minato-kun for doing the same thing. I guess that makes me a bit of a hypocrite. I'm sure that Minato won't ever have to know. Naruto said to her with small wink, getting a chuckle out of the woman. Thank you, Naruto. Kushina told Minato's father. Thank you, I needed that. It's fine, Naruto said to the redhead. But I believe that we have a wedding to go to. Yes, Kushina said. We do. With that, the two continued on their way through the monastery in a comfortable silence. The rest of the turns were made without comment, and before either knew it, they were standing in front of the white strips of cloth that blocked the garden from view. Naruto turned to Kushina and offered his elbow hesitantly. I know that I'll never be your two-san, Kushina, he began. But would you allow me to give you away? The woman's eyes widened at the question before she took his elbow with a smile. I would love it if you would, Naruto. Kushina accepted the elbow, lacing her own arm through it before they both moved forward to the cloth. Naruto reached forward and used his hand to push the cloth to the side to allow Kushina through. When she did, she took one look at the surroundings and gasped. Sakura blossoms towered overhead. The bright pink trees seemed to let down a constant shower of their petals, covering the ground in a pink glaze. The sun shined through the canopy, casting rays of light down on certain spots of the monastery's garden. With her trained eyesight, Kushina managed to spot several birds perched in the trees, each one seemingly a different color from the last, making the branches of the sakura blossoms alight with colors. Several meters from the bride-to-be was a pond. Several koi fish swam around in the water, all of them different colors, much like the birds. Just in front of the pond was what made Kushina the happiest. It was her soon-to-be husband. He looked so handsome. Minato was standing on a white platform with stairs leading up to the stand. A white arch was also on the platform, resting just behind him. Kushina didn't even realize that she had started walking again until she began to take the steps up to the podium. She was too focused on the man standing on the podium. The one with the spiky yellow hair, blue eyes and the stupidest grin on his face that she had ever seen. The one that she was going to spend the rest of her life with. You look beautiful, Minato complimented as soon as she made it onto the platform, taking her hand in his as she detached herself from Naruto's elbow. So do you, she replied as she continued to stare into his eyes. He did the same. Neither noticed Naruto move around to the other side of the platform, with his back to the small pond. Giving the two a few seconds to snap out of their daze, Naruto was finally forced to cough rather loudly before they turned their attention to him. Should I do the quick version? Naruto asked, amused at the behavior between the two. He didn't know if he'd ever met a more in-love couple than his son and Kushina. Or the regular one? They both blushed red. The regular version, Minato managed to say after he managed to get his complexion under control. The wedding proceeded normally after that. Naruto read out the lines that he'd rehearsed during his time at the monastery, waiting for the right time to call Minato and Kushina. He spoke for over an hour, reciting the same words that a priest from the fire temple would have, not stumbling or stuttering, speaking as if he'd said the same words for years instead of days. At some point during his speaking, Kushina and Minato had returned to staring at each other, but Naruto made no movement to interrupt. He had a feeling that this wasn't the same situation that happened before. The blonde and redhead held each other's hands, either making any movement to pull away. Eventually, Naruto finally made his way to the end of his ceremonial speech, reaching the part that required the would-be husband and wife to answer a question. Minato Namikaze, Naruto spoke. Do you swear to love Kushina Uzumaki for the rest of your mortal life and beyond? Do you swear to support her? To nurture her when she can't? To be there for her for the rest of your days? Yes, was Naruto's response. With Minato's answer, Naruto then asked Kushina, Kushina Uzumaki, do you swear to love Minato Namikaze for the rest of your mortal life and beyond? Do you swear to support him? To nurture him when he can't? To be there for him for the rest of your days? Naruto recited, already knowing what her answer was, just like he knew what Minato's would be. Yes, she answered. Then, with these words as your oath, I pronounce you husband and wife," Naruto announced joyously. As if she had been restrained by some sort of invisible barrier, Kushina leapt at Minato, grabbing him by the collar of his garb and pulling him down to allow her to smash her lips against his in a passionate kiss. Minato offered no resistance, his arms wrapping around Kushina's waist, holding her against him as the two shared their first kiss as husband and wife. Naruto watched them with a smile. He brought him immense joy to be able to see his son so happy, seemingly so complete with Kushina in his arms. With one final glance at the happy couple, he decided that he had seen enough, and moved away to give the newly created family some privacy. Neither would know how much Naruto altered the garden to suit their wedding, rearranging something that had reminded him of a better time. Naruto hoped he would never have to tell them of how little he recognized this garden. Of how little he recognized something that reminded him of his childhood. Naruto didn't know how long he'd been standing in front of the bamboo tree that acted as the grave marker for his brother's final resting place. He didn't know how much time had passed. He didn't know if his son and his wife were still in the front part of the garden, expressing their love for each other, or if they were even in the garden at all. He knew that altering the garden of this monastery, the place he had truly called home for countless years, was the right thing to do for Minato. Perhaps not something he would have wanted with all his being, but nevertheless, he wanted his son happy, and if altering the garden would make him happy, then he would do it. It was the least he could do for not being beside him for so long. Naruto knew that Minato might feel like it wasn't his fault, but Naruto knew it was. He shouldn't have believed that Minato and Konan's bodies were incinerated without seeing some sort of proof, a burnt piece of cloth, blood, a burnt limb, anything. He shouldn't have taken what he saw at face value. Perhaps it was his age that made him sloppy. Perhaps he was blinded by the knowledge that Minami was dead. Whatever the case, Naruto had failed. Now, he had a son who was a grown man, and possibly still alive daughter who was now a grown woman, growing up who knows where. Much like the other times when he felt this kind of belief that he had failed at something, that he had not taken the best course of action, he tried to imagine what his brother would have said. Naruto may be the oldest biological being on the planet, but he knew, with doubt, that Hagoromo would still have him beat in wisdom, at least 99% of the time. The first son of Kage Otsutsuki had always known what to say when it came to making his younger brother feel better. But as of late, Naruto found that trying to think of what his brother would say became harder and more difficult. The situations became more personal, and with the distance of time between the splitting of their family and the few hours that Naruto had been with him before Hagoromo died, Naruto knew little about how his brother had changed personally over the years. His personal beliefs had remained the same, that much Naruto knew, but how would Hagoromo take him changing the garden that they had grown up in for his son and his now wife? How would Hagoromo take the knowledge that he had wiped out an entire city of people, of women, children and innocents because his family had been killed by one of their members? Naruto couldn't think of anything that Hagoromo would say. He didn't know if the Rinnegan user would condemn him for the murder of the Land of Sky or agree that he had taken down a possible menace to the world. He still didn't know who the one was who spoke to the leader of the Sky Ninja. With these more personal questions, Naruto had a hard time thinking about what his brother would say, his lack of knowledge about Hagoromo Ōtsutsuki becoming prominent. Naruto didn't know how long he stood there, staring at that bamboo plant, occasionally looking at small purple plant that lay to the side. The plant was tiny when compared to the towering bamboo tree a short distance from it. The plant itself was known to botanists, herbalists, and many others who had an in-depth knowledge of plant life, as the butterfly orchid, due to the fact that many times when the plant bloomed, its petals were symmetrical, much like a butterfly's wings. The plant was known to have the ability to calm the mind if grounded into a paste and swallowed, along to help soothe serious burns, though it did nothing to help them heal. It also served as the grave marker for Naruto's second wife. She had always liked the small rare plant, its rare symmetrical petals had always interested her. Naruto didn't even notice that he had company until the hand on his shoulder alerted him to that fact. Thankfully, before his body could lash out, his mind reminded it that they weren't the only people to be in the monastery. So, instead of spinning around with a fist ready to take someone's head off, Naruto merely spun around, arms by his side tensing only slightly. It was Minato, with Kushina by his side, their hands interlocked. "To-san." Minato began before anything else was said. His voice was completely serious, but a smile was on his face. "Thank you for what you have done for us today. Neither Kushina nor myself can say anything that will be able to express our gratitude for setting all this up. You made my dream come true," Kushina continued, a similar smile on her face. You went above and beyond what I had imagined. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, Naruto. Naruto couldn't help a small smile come to his face at the expressions of Minato and Kushina. It wasn't their expressions of thankfulness that he could easily make out, but it was the pure happiness that he could sense just underneath that. Neither of you owe me anything, Naruto told the newlyweds. Least of all you, Minato. Naruto's son merely shook his head at his father's words. Two-san, you searched for me when you heard I was alive. That makes any kind of debt you feel is between us repaid. You came looking for me, when you could have continued to live out your life as if I didn't exist. The blonde explained. I never could have ignored a sign that you were alive, Naruto said, shaking his head. You, your Ka-san and sister made up my whole world when we were together as a family. It would disrespect everything that I had with Minami if I didn't at least look into a whisper that said to me that you were alive. And that is why there will never be any kind of debt between us, Minato replied with a smile. You proved that you truly loved me like a parent would a child, and that's all I need. Naruto didn't reply to Minato's words, instead turning around, back to the bamboo plant with a sigh. After a few moments, Minato walked up beside him. Who's buried here? Minato questioned softly. Naruto cast his son a sideward glance before he turned back to his brother's tree. How could you tell? Naruto said, asking his own question. I've seen Kakashi give the memorial stone back at Konoha a similar glance to know that look, Minato responded. But you didn't answer my question, who's buried here? Minato repeated. Naruto released another sigh, before going silent, opening his mouth after a few moments. My brother, Naruto answered, softly. He noticed Minato tensed up slightly at the notion that he had more dead family, his hand twitching. He is buried beneath the bamboo tree. Naruto once again fell silent before speaking again a short time later. As for who is under the butterfly orchid, that would be your Ka-san. This time he saw Minato visibly tense, his back straightening, his eyes widening while his breath hitched. She always had a fascination with the butterfly orchid, Naruto continued as if Minato wasn't reacting as he was. The color and symmetry would capture her attention for hours if she had nothing better to do. Looking over to his son, Naruto motioned to the grave. Talk to her, he said. She would love to hear how you've been doing over the years. Minato looked over to his father before turning to look at his mother's resting place. He felt Kushina come up behind him, resting her hands on his shoulders and her head at the back of his neck. The blonde rubbed his hands over her own as he kept looking at the grave. Speak to her, Kushina whispered in his ear. It's all right, Minato, I'll be here. Taking a calming breath, Minato walked forward slightly, Kushina doing the same as her hands slid down till they were around Minato's waist. Hi, Ka-san. Minato started before falling silent. Naruto gave his son an encouraging look when he turned to look at him. It's me, Minato. I wanted to say thank you for what you've done for me. Minato swallowed. Two-san, he told me that you sacrificed yourself for me, gave me time to escape. I might not have ever met you, at least not in any way I can remember, but I just wanted to let you know that I'll always think of you as my Ka-san. Minato stopped speaking to suppress some of the tears that began to form. Minto then stepped to the side and brought Kushina around so that she was standing beside him with Minato's arm wrapped around her waist. This is Kushina. Minato continued after managing to center himself a bit more. She and I just got married. Two-sen organized everything. Minato paused, thinking of what to say before resuming. Two-sen found me not too long ago. I didn't believe him right away when he said that he was related to me. Minato's voice then turned a bit sheepish. I almost had him thrown in cell. But I managed to convince him that I was. Naruto said, speaking to the grave of his deceased wife alongside his son. We had a hugging reunion and everything. Naruto told the heir with a chuckle. All was silent for a while as no one spoke. That was until Kushina decided that she had something to say. Minami-san, the Uzumaki said to the grave, causing the father and son to look over at her. I just want to let you know that Minato had grown up to be a fine man. He's the leader of our village that has thousands of people living in it. Kushina then turned to her husband with a smile that was mirrored on his face. It's a position of responsibility and honor, something that Minato-kun has in spades. She turned back to the grave. You would be proud of the person your son has grown into. That you would, Minami. Naruto said lowly, be loud enough for the other two occupants of the garden to hear. That you would. This time the silence was for longer. everyone having said their piece to the grave of Minami. The garden was silent, not bushes rustling, nor birds spoke their calls, almost as if the monastery was giving the three people in the makeshift graveyard a silent time to mourn what could have been. "What is this place, Toussaint?" Minato asked after several moments, turning to look at his father, Kushina doing the same. "What is this place to you?" "This place," Naruto began after a breath, "is where I grew up. This place is my home." "This place." Naruto trailed off. He didn't turn to see his son or daughter-in-law's face. It was most likely that of mild shock. After all, when could they have ever expected that he would have been raised in a place such as this, seemingly isolated from the rest of the world? "I grew up here with my Ka-san and my brother," Naruto continued. "Here, Ka-san taught us everything she thought that we would need in order to survive the world. I'm going to guess that she is." Minato's question trailed off, though anyone would have been able to know in which direction that question was heading in. "Yes, Minato," Naruto said, answering the unfinished question. "My Ka-san has passed as well." Naruto then gestured to a tree over the left side of the graves they were currently standing at. The tree itself was large and twisting, the trunk seemingly trying to wrap around itself as it stretched upwards. The branches of the tree spread out like arms, trying to touch the entire garden and casting a shadow over everything underneath it in the midday sun. The leaves were a forest green, the bark a light gray. Thick roots gripped the ground, absorbing nutrients from deep within the earth. "She is buried underneath that tree, much like my brother and Minami are under their own. A tombstone would detract from the beauty of this place, and that is something that I know that they wouldn't want to happen," Naruto continued. "What were their names?" Minato asked as he looked at the great tree his grandmother was buried under. Naruto hesitated for several moments, contemplating telling his son a lie or the truth. Neither Hagoromo nor Kagaya were common names, nor had they ever really been so, seeing as they were both clan names. But then again, no one really knew the legend of the Sage of Six Paths anymore, never mind his real name, or his mother's. "Hagoromo," Naruto answered, "was my brother's name. My Ka-san's name was Kagaya." Minato made no move to speak to his uncle and grandmother, like he had his own mother. He instead let his gaze linger on the two graves as his mind linked the names to the graves. Much like before, a silence lingered, this time, broken by Naruto. "I think that's enough for one day," Naruto said to Minato and Kushina. He allowed a smile to make its way to his face. "Now I think it's time to cut the cake." Naruto almost laughed at the smile that Kushina gained when he said the name of the desert. Minato gained a similar smile, but it seemed more subdued than his wife's, not as happy or excited. "Last time I checked, Toussaint, you didn't have any cake," Minato said, pointing out the supposed flaw in Naruto's words. Kushina then elbowed him, with a bit of force if his small yelp was anything to go by. "Don't be rude," Kushina scolded the grown man. "If Naruto says he has cake, then I believe him. Why would he lie about having cake?" Naruto let a chuckle come from his mouth. "It's alright, Kushina, Minato most likely hasn't figured it out yet," Naruto told her. He then gave his son a look that said, "Figure it out." Minato's face formed a frown of concentration as he thought over his father's words before it clicked into place. When it did, he chuckled. "So that's why it took longer than it should have to get to the garden," Minato said. "I passed the room but not the entrance." Minato felt that it was strange for the monastery to not have a room closer to the garden. He had actually passed the room as he went to garden from the room he and Kushina had arrived in. "Correct," Naruto said with a smile. "Now, shall we go to the cake?" It was a question, but Naruto was already moving and Minato and Kushina followed, the blonde's hands still around the waist of his wife. The duo followed Naruto back through the garden, past the sakura blossoms where their wedding took place, and back into the monastery. This time, however, instead of going right and going back the way they came, Naruto took a left, prompting Minato and Kushina to follow. A right turn later and group was standing in front of a room with a small dining table seated for two people, fine plates and silver cutlery, a dish cover preventing the meals underneath being seen while keeping them warm. An unlit candlestick was at the center with twin wine glasses for the bottle of wine that was placed at one end. Beside the dining table was another table. This one was smaller than the other with a cake sitting on the surface. White icing decorated most of the cake with 4 small columns holding up another small layer of cake, on which were 2 small figurines. One was obviously male by the garb, the other female. The toys seemed to be in mid-kiss on top of the cake, with the blonde, the male one, having its hand wrapped around the waist of the red-headed one, the female. Minato chuckled as he looked at the two figurines at the top of the cake. I'm not going to ask, he told his father, who gave his own chuckle. Minato took another look at the setup and frowned. There are only 2 seats, and the table is set for 2, he stated to his father. Where will you sit? I'm not sitting, Minato, Naruto said to his son. Before Minato could question why, Naruto was already speaking. Remember, this is your wedding day, you and Kushina come first today, not me, he explained. So sit, eat, enjoy, because you will have to go back to Konoha soon. With that, Naruto began to walk to the exit, but a question from Kushina stopped him from leaving. What do you mean soon? We have plenty of time, Kushina said, but Naruto turned with a smile that spoke of amusement. While it may seem like not a lot of time has passed, Kushina, that is because we are high up on a mountain and above the clouds. Because of this, we get more time in the sun, Naruto explained. I can assure you that it is almost 3 o'clock. At the realization of the time, Kushina spluttered a bit while Minato's eyes went wide slightly. What? Kushina asked in shock. But it should be midday, she exclaimed. Oh, by what count? Naruto told her. When you first got here, it was about 10 in Konoha. You took about an hour to get changed, Kushina. The wedding itself went for around an hour and a half, and we were then at the graves for half an hour, Naruto explained. But that leaves 2 hours unaccounted for, Minato protested. I believe that's what happens when the wedding kiss turns into the wedding see who can suck the other's mouth off first contest, Naruto said with a deadpan. Minato's cheeks turned pink while Kushina made the reason known why she was called Tomato. Naruto let loose a laugh as he looked at the reactions of the 2 newlyweds. Now I'm going to give the 2 of you some privacy. Enjoy your dinner. Dinner? Minato echoed. But you said that it was 3. Why would we have dinner so early? Minato asked. When do you think you'll get to have a romantic wedding dinner at Konoha? Naruto answered with a question of his own. With the conversation over, Naruto made his way to the doorway, but just as he made his way to entrance, he stopped and turned around. Oh, one last thing, he said to the couple who looked like they were just about to move to their dinner. His voice then turned teasing. Easy on the wine, I didn't bring an extra futon for any extracurricular activities. He left the room after parting with those words. A small smile played on his face. He was several meters away before a voice rang out, echoing off the monastery's walls. To-san! It was Minato, but for a second Naruto felt a flashback to a different time, one where instead of his caller being a blonde adult, it was a red-headed boy with violet, ringed eyes that chased him around a very different garden. For a moment, Naruto froze as the memories took him, as they played out in his mind, before his own laughter back to echo off the halls of monastery. It seems he still had it, even after all these years. It would be later that day that Kushina and Minato would return to their lives in Konoha, the majority of the population completely ignorant that of their leader's change in marital status. Those who were in the know would be told over the next week, each one offering their congratulations to couple and express their happiness to them. Kakashi Hatake was one of those people, of those trusted with information that could bring about the downfall of the Hokage. It made him incredibly honored to be trusted with such information even though he was only 13, an age that most would say would be too young for such secrets. He was incredibly grateful for his teacher to have not listened to those who said that he was too young. It not only showed his faith in his abilities and skills as a ninja, but also in his maturity as a person. Like with those who had been told, Kakashi had told Minato of how happy he was for him and Kushina, but also of where and how it happened. Minato had merely given him a conspiratorial wink and told him that he had outside help. The artificial Sharingan user's mind had immediately gone to the black-haired man, Naruto, the one who claimed to be the father of the Yondaime. It appeared that he may have been wrong about the man. He had been suspicious of him and his story ever since he had first arrived in the village. But he had given Kushina and Minato their own wedding somehow when he could have left with that information and sold it to the highest bidder in IWA. But even if Kakashi accepted the fact that the man was telling the truth about his relation to the current Hokage, there were still things that didn't add up in his story. Like how a civilian had been able to take down several ninja at once, even if he was supposedly trained and underestimated. It would require the kind of training that a civilian simply wouldn't be able to put the effort into unless they didn't require a job, or had a source of income that required little work. The fighting style that Naruto would have had to employ as well would have had to have been something of quality, not something that a civilian could find in some self-guide to fighting, or even a fighting instructor. It would have to be something that had been improved upon multiple times, tested in fights. Not something that civilian would be able to get their hands on easily. Shinobi and kunoichi were very protective of their skills, no matter where they came from. There was also the lack of a name for the place that the shinobi hailed from. Kakashi highly doubted that anyone who had their family killed in cold blood would simply leave it at that, and not find out who did it. He had voiced these concerns to Minato, but the man had waved him off, stating that he knew about them but was waiting for Naruto to come clean. He had pushed Minato for why he was leaving this alone, but Minato had merely stated that everyone has their secrets. Kakashi left the topic of Naruto alone after promising his sensei that he wouldn't pry or actively seek to uncover the man's secrets. Now, a month later, Kakashi was going to something he always did when had the chance. Something he did when he wasn't out on a mission or when he wasn't already doing something that would occupy his time. Something he did whenever he felt himself get that little bit too happy. Visit his failures. The only choice he had was whether to visit the one at the Konoha Cemetery or the Memorial Stone. Either one would work, the decision only hinged on which one he felt particularly guilty about today. A few moments of contemplation, and Kakashi began to make his way to the Memorial Stone. He knew that if any of his friends, Guy in particular, had seen him in this mood, his eyes, or eye, a little more unfocused than usual, his posture seemingly slumped, they would have known immediately where he was going and would have tried to steer him away from his course. That, however, wasn't going to happen today. Guy was away training somewhere around Konoha and Asuma was probably hanging around with Kurenai. There was always the chance of his sensei being around, but the likelihood of that was low. Being Hokage wasn't a position that allowed for one to have much free time, though that had never stopped his teacher before. As he walked through the streets, Kakashi contemplated getting some flowers for the grave of his Uchiha friend but decided against it. He was just going to visit for a bit. A bit being a few hours. However, Kakashi's plans of visiting his friend's resting place was dashed almost as soon as it had begun. "Ah, Kakashi-san, I was looking for you." The voice was one that, while he wasn't familiar with it, he was able to attach a face to it a few moments after hearing it. "Naruto-san." Kakashi gave his usual lazy response as he turned around to face the man. "You know, you could just call me Kakashi like everyone else in the village. Only if you do the same for me," was the reply from the black-haired man. Naruto was wearing the same brown clothes the last time Kakashi had seen him. He wondered if that was the only set of clothes that Naruto had. Granted, he had only seen the man twice, but still. Shinobi usually wore the same clothes for different reasons, but civilians would usually dress differently every day. "Sure, Naruto, so why were you looking for me?" the teen questioned the elder. "You're going to visit your friend's grave." There was no question involved, Naruto was stating a fact. Kakashi's eyes sharpened as he took in the man before him. "Minato-sensei told you." Much like the words spoken before Kakashi's, there was no question. "Yes, he told me about how he and a lot of other people are worried about you." Naruto then released a breath through his nose. "He wants me to talk to you, believes that I can help you, though I don't know why." Naruto's disbelief at the Hokage's request of him was almost as big as Kakashi's. Well, if that's all. Kakashi turned to move through the streets again, this time quicker than before to lose the civilian, but a hand landing on his shoulder prevented him. While he considered whether or not he should just yank his shoulder out of the elder man's grip, Naruto's voice spoke up from behind him. "Actually, I was going to ask if I could go with you." That stopped Kakashi short, and a small frown formed on his face as he, once again, turned around to face the man. Most people, when they tried to help him, would always try to steer him away from the memorial. Kakashi thought for several moments about what Naruto was asking. There was no rule against civilians from visiting the Shinobi Memorial, so even if he did decline the man's request, he could just ask for directions. Though then again, he did want privacy when he visited the memorial and allowed his guilt to overwhelm him. It wasn't something that he wanted the entirety of Konoha to know about. But the memorial wasn't private and couldn't be reserved unless for a special occasion. "If you want," Kakashi said slowly, finally agreeing, "you can come." "Thank you," Naruto said, giving a small bow of the head as a show of thanks. "Do you wish to lead the way?" he said, gesturing down the road. Without another word, Kakashi moved off, heading towards the memorial stone with Naruto trailing behind him. Moving through the crowd, Kakashi thought about what kind of angle Naruto was going to try and play. He was certain that the man was going to talk to him, to try to help him move past the guilt he felt over the deaths of Rin and Obito, but he was destined to fail, just like all the rest who had tried. Was Naruto going to give an attempt at tough love, yell at him that it wasn't his fault, that it was war, that he should get over it? That had been Kurena's angle when she tried to rid him of the guilt, tired of his moping. Would he appear sympathetic, to appear to know what he was going to, much like Asuma had tried to do before Kakashi had ruthlessly shot him down, asking if he had lost anyone as close to him as he had Rin and Obito? He hadn't spoken to Asuma for a month, and even now, talk between them was strained. A part of Kakashi hoped and pleaded that Naruto gave him an opening to annoy the man. Perhaps if he did it enough, he could spend the rest of his time around the memorial alone. How he liked it. Within a few minutes, the duo arrived at the third training ground, the home of the memorial stone. The dark, kunai-shaped monument to the fallen ninja of Konoha gleamed in the midday sun. Etched onto the marble surface were the names of various ninja that had given their lives for the continued protection of their family, and the village they dwelled in. As soon as they entered the clearing, Kakashi immediately walked up to the memorial stone and came to a stop in front of it. He internally waited for Naruto to approach him, to begin speaking, but all the man did walk up beside him and began to look at the stone just as he was. Kakashi still waited for the man to open his mouth, but he never did, content to simply stare at the stone and reflect, just as he was. It was only after several minutes of fruitless waiting did Kakashi fully turn his attention to the stone, Naruto having shown that he wasn't going to talk. The two stood there for 10 minutes, which turned to 20, then 40, till finally an hour had passed, and yet even then, the two remained still. That hour turned into 2, and then 3. It was on the third hour that the silence was broken, but not by Naruto, but by Kakashi. The teen releasing a sigh that broke the barrier of silence that had stood for so long, he then turned to Naruto, who was still looking at the memorial stone. "What do you want, Naruto?" Kakashi asked bluntly. Naruto didn't answer for a minute, after which he turned and spoke. "What do you mean, Kakashi? I mean, why are you still here? You could have left after the first or second hour, but you stayed here for 3 hours. That's something I do when I feel particularly guilty. So I'll ask again, what do you want?" Kakashi said as his visible eye narrowed. This had gone on for too long. Naruto had been here for too long. He had wanted to feel guilty by himself, not with company. "And what makes you think I don't feel particularly guilty today, Kakashi?" Naruto asked. When Kakashi didn't answer, Naruto continued. "You forget, Kakashi, that like you, I too have lost someone. Where you lost your teammates, I lost my wife, and I will forever hold that as one of my biggest failures, much like I know that you will do the same with the situation with your comrades." Naruto then turned back to the stone, still speaking. "I know that it seems like you can't move on, Dash. That's because I can't." Kakashi interrupted, his voice rising as he spoke. "I can't move on because everything reminds me of them. I see Obito at the training grounds, I see Rin at the academy. I see them both around every single street, just around the corner, except when I get there, they aren't there." Kakashi was now yelling at Naruto. His voice would be able to be heard by anyone near the third training ground, if there was anyone. Kakashi closed his single visible eye and released a breath before opening it back up again. When he spoke, his voice was significantly lower, though it slowly began to build up again. "None of my friends know what I'm going through, they simply tell me to get over it, but I can't. Minato-sensei doesn't either, as much as he would like to think so. They didn't die in front of him. You don't know, Dash. If anyone knows what you're going through, it's me, so I wouldn't finish that sentence if I were you." Naruto snapped, turning to look at the gray-haired teen with anger on his face. "You are acting like a child, throwing a tantrum for attention. You are not the only one in the world to have lost someone." The amount of fury in Naruto's voice surprised Kakashi, but the look in Naruto's eyes made him freeze. He saw the man's green eyes pulse. Where they were once a normal color, they were now a brilliant emerald that blazed with power and anger. It was there for a full moment before the color was repressed and Naruto's eyes were once again their normal color. "You forget, Kakashi." Naruto's voice made Kakashi focus back on the present. There was anger in his voice, but it was slowly fading. "That for almost 2 decades I thought that my son was dead, along with my wife and daughter. For almost 2 decades I practically wallowed in grief, surviving, not living. I have lived with the knowledge that I was the reason that my family died, because I wasn't strong enough to protect them, not aware enough to see that they were in danger. It was only when I got Minato back, and I was telling him about his Kasen, that I realized something. My wife wouldn't have wanted that life for me. She wouldn't have wanted me to let my grief consume me. No, she would have wanted me to live on, to make sure I made the best out of life for the both of us. Perhaps, Naruto continued, if I had done that, I wouldn't have had to wait so long to be reunited by my son. Perhaps my travels may have taken me to Konoha, and I would have seen that little blonde-haired boy running around and realized that that's my son. Do you understand what I'm trying to say, Kakashi? Naruto asked. Kakashi was silent for several minutes, both thinking over Naruto's words and what he had seen. Normal eyes didn't do that, Kakashi knew that much, unless one had a Dijitsu, which Naruto didn't, and neither did Minato. Naruto didn't come from a ninja clan. Kakashi might not be as good as a Sensonin, but he was able to tell that Naruto had about as much chakra as a genin, the amount that a one should have by his age if they only dabbled in the chakra arts. Naruto's eye change wasn't a trick of the light, Kakashi saw that much, but he also wasn't going to lift up his headband to take a look at Naruto with Obito's Sharingan. That would be breaking his promise to his teacher, a deliberate action to uncover Naruto's secrets. If his eyes weren't part of those secrets, Kakashi would eat his face mask. As to Naruto's words, Kakashi didn't really know what to think. Naruto hadn't actually said to move on or anything of the sort, but Kakashi got the feeling that he was meant to imply that with his words. The words from the dark-haired man had been different than the others that had been given to him from others, the main difference between them being he didn't understand what he'd being told. On one hand, he never heard the man say to move on, yet on the other, Kakashi felt that it was strongly implied, but on a third hand, Kakashi felt that Naruto was trying to say that he was meant to find some sort of middle ground. No, I don't. What are you trying to say? Kakashi told the man. Naruto gave a sigh. I'm saying that you need to do what Rin and Obito would want you to do. When Kakashi looked like he was going to talk, Naruto spoke first. Would they want you to stay here mourning over them, or make sure that something like this wouldn't happen again? You don't have to forget about them, Kakashi, merely to forgive yourself. Accept that it was your fault if you must, but your constant grieving is only insulting their memory. Live your life, Kakashi, for yourself, Obito and Rin, don't waste away. Naruto looked to the memorial stone before turning back. It is up to you, Kakashi, to choose what you want to do with your life. Just remember that you're not alone. Naruto then turned away and moved to exit the clearing, leaving Kakashi to his thoughts while the single-eyed teen gazed at the retreating man's back. I don't know what to do. Kakashi spoke at last, before Naruto had left the clearing. The words of the adolescent caused Naruto to stop. I'm the last of my team. Kakashi continued. Minato-sensei is Hokage and is constantly occupied with other work. I can't go to him for all my problems. Team 7 is disbanded. What am I to do? Naruto didn't answer Kakashi, nor did he turn around. The young teen was, at first, put out, hoping the man could solve his problems, but before he could turn back to the kunai-shaped memorial, Naruto finally answered. You are lacking in immediate purpose, Kakashi. Naruto said as he turned around. Before your team was disbanded, your purpose was clear: protect your teammates, listen to your sensei, accomplish your mission. That was what you have known, but now, you need to find a new reason to get up in the morning, and only you can find it. Accomplish the mission clearly isn't enough for you anymore. It must be something more substantial. With those final words of wisdom, Naruto left the clearing, leaving Kakashi alone with his thoughts. A new purpose. The words echoed around in the head of the Hatake. Thank you, Naruto. He didn't know if it would work, but he knew Obito and Rin, and he knew that they would have been disgusted with how he was acting. Obito would have wanted him to be Hokage, to lead the village in his stead, to keep Konoha stable when he couldn't. Rin would have wanted him to move on, to not dwell on something that would cause him so much pain. Kakashi spent the rest of the afternoon pondering on what his friends would have wanted for him, and wondering what he should do with his life. Naruto made his way to the Hokage Tower after his talk with Kakashi. He had run into the teen as soon as he entered the village after his son's wedding and decided that it was a good time as any to talk to him like he promised Minato. Since he had talked with Kakashi, he hadn't gotten to see Minato since he and Kushina left the monastery over a month ago. The partially immortal man had changed back the garden when the two had left, changing the landscape until it reminded him of the garden that once was, but even so it still hadn't been the same. The entire garden had been moved and he knew it. A tree had been a bit more to the right, a bush a bit more to the left. No matter what he did, he never saw it how it once was, only a pale imitation. So he had altered the garden back again, back to the one that Kushina and Minato knew so well, back to the place that they had been married at. It didn't bother him as much as the imitation had. When Naruto finally entered the room that was his son's office, he encountered something he didn't expect. Kushina was crying in Minato's arms off to one side, her head resting on his shoulder as tears leaked from her closed eyes. His son merely held her, rubbing her back and whispering consoling words into her ear. Another person was in the room, a male, face wrinkled with age, a couple of liver spots dotting their face while wearing a white haori with a red kimono and white sash. Gray spiked hair was adorned on his head, similar to that of Kakashi but from age rather than genetics. A goatee of similar color hung of his jaw. They were sitting in a chair in front of Minato's desk, but he was turned to couple, a sad expression on his face as he looked at a crying Kushina. That changed when Naruto walked into the room, his face snapping towards him. The man's sad face gave way to narrowed eyes that quickly widened in shock before it was suppressed and his face turned neutral. It took a few minutes for Naruto to recognize the person under all the age and wear. Hiruzen Sarutobi. There were no curse, no profanity that Naruto could use for the current situation. He had honestly hoped that he would never have had to interact with anyone that he knew from Konoha when he first came to the shinobi village. Hiruzen had obviously recognized him. After all he had done was change his eyes and hair and added a few wrinkles, not changed any of his features, though if he knew that Minato wouldn't have known anything he might have to avoid this situation. He only prayed that Hiruzen kept his mouth shut until he could talk with him. Minato, Naruto said, turning his attention to his son. What's wrong with Kushina? The blonde seemed to only just realize that he was in the room, having his attention focused on comforting his wife. Two-san dash. Hiruzen immediately began choking. No doubt he hadn't expected that he would be Minato's father. Naruto wouldn't be surprised if he was having a mini heart attack right now. Hiruzen, are you okay? Minato asked. Yes. The Sarutobi gasped, slowly getting his breath back until he returned to normal. Just choked on some air. Minato gave Hiruzen a raised eyebrow, not believing it for a second but dropped the subject anyway. The current Hokage looked back to Naruto, Kushina still leaning on his shoulder. Two-san. Whether Minato didn't hear the small cough that came from Hiruzen, or merely didn't hear it, Naruto didn't know. Kushina just heard some distressing news. One of her family members has recently passed away. Naruto allowed a sad smile onto his features. I'm sorry, Kushina. He sent his condolences to the redhead. The Uzumaki looked up to acknowledge his sympathy before burying her head back into Minato's shoulder. Would you mind if I asked who? Naruto said to Minato. It's okay. This will probably be told to the whole village tomorrow in an announcement. It won't matter if you know a few hours before anyone else. Minato told his father. Her name was Mito Uzumaki, the wife of the Shodai Hokage. She was Kushina's aunt. While outwardly, Naruto displayed sympathy while seemingly having no idea who Mito Uzumaki was, inwardly, he was quite shocked. Mito was approaching middle age in Uzumaki terms, and as far as he knew, was quite healthy. There should be no reason why she died so young. However, he knew that he couldn't ask how she died. Perhaps he could ask later when Kushina wasn't within earshot, but asking how someone died when there was someone grieving in the room wasn't exactly good manners. I see, Naruto said. Noting the state of Kushina, Naruto decided that it was best he gave his son and his wife some privacy. I shall leave you to comfort Kushina then, Minato. I only came here to tell you that I had returned to Konoha. I've also talked to Kakashi, but we can speak later. I'll leave you with Kushina. Thank you, Two-san, Minato replied with a small smile despite the situation. And welcome back. Naruto gave his son a smile as well before he went to leave the room. I think I'll leave you as well, Minato, Hiruzen said abruptly, standing up from his seat. Kushina needs your comfort without an audience. I'll come back tomorrow to speak with you. The Sarutobi then swiftly left the room, catching up to Minato's retreating father before the son could bid him farewell. The Sandaime Hokage quickly caught up to the dark-haired man, walking by his side as they both left the building. Naruto said nothing to Sarutobi while the latter did nothing to initiate conversation. They both continued walking, but instead of towards their homes, it was towards the forests that surrounded the training grounds. Once they were thoroughly into the woodland area, it was only then that Naruto spoke. How did she die? There was no need to clarify who she was. She was an Uzumaki. They're meant to live for around 200 years, yet she didn't even make half that. Naruto didn't look at Hiruzen as he spoke while they both continued to walk, but he didn't need to be watching the man to be able to hear him sigh. It was a multitude of things, the professor began. Perhaps the most prominent was broken heart syndrome. She lost Hashirama. Naruto interjected. If she truly died because of broken heart syndrome, it would have happened around the time of when he died, not over 3 decades after. He still didn't look at Hiruzen as he spoke. Hiruzen sighed. She didn't just lose Hashirama, Naruto, he said, saying the man's name for the first time. She also lost her son and grandson, Tobirama-sensei too. That stopped Naruto up short. He stood still for several moments, Hiruzen beside him, before he released a breath. I'm sorry, I didn't know. He apologized, but the Sandaime waved him off. It's okay, you didn't know after all. They both continued walking for a bit before Hiruzen spoke again. So, Minato is your son? It was half a statement and half a question. Yes, Naruto answered shortly. I presume he doesn't know. Yes, and it will stay that way until I decided to tell him. Naruto rounded on Hiruzen. You don't say a word. Hiruzen merely raised an eyebrow at Naruto's aggressive display. You'll have to try better to intimidate me, Naruto, that won't cut it anymore. When Naruto's brow furrowed and he looked ready to try again, Hiruzen quickly moved to placate. But I understand what you're trying to say, you'll tell him when you're ready. But if I may? Hiruzen asked, wanting to input his own advice for Naruto. When the man didn't move to interrupt him, Hiruzen continued. I only ask that you don't take your time. Minato won't like it that you kept such a big secret from him for too long. He will feel like you don't trust him. Naruto turned away, focusing on the forest again as began moving, Hiruzen doing the same a split second later. I'll tell him when I'm ready, Naruto said, more to himself than Hiruzen. For several moments, there was silence between the two as they moved through the forest. However, it was inevitably broken. You said Mito died from a multitude of things. What else contributed to her death? As I'm sure you know, the Sarutobi clan head began. Being an Uzumaki doesn't prevent one from sickness, though it does offer one a kind of resistance against disease. From what little Mito let slip over recent years, I believe that she was fighting some kind of illness, though I don't know what type. Another, Hiruzen paused to sigh, was because of the extraction of the Kyuubi. That caused Naruto to turn to look at him sharply. We found out about it 15 or so years ago, but kept it classified. When you removed the Kyuubi from Mito, you left some of its chakra behind. Without the Kyuubi to direct its chakra to not attack its host, the chakra began to target Mito's organs slowly at first, having to fight against Mito's chakra, which managed to repel most of the damage, but it got there eventually, though the damage was significantly reduced. What harm the chakra managed to inflict was enough to lower Mito's life expectancy quite drastically. It was only then that Hiruzen noticed that he was walking alone, turning back, and he spied Naruto leaning on a tree, his hand propping him up. Backtracking towards the man, Hiruzen arrived just in time that he managed to hear Naruto's mutterings. I didn't really do that, did I? The genjutsu-covered man whispered to himself. At least until Hiruzen began to speak again. No, you didn't, he said sternly. It was the first time you had ever had to do anything like that. I wouldn't surprised if you made a mistake on the first try. Mito wouldn't want you to hate yourself like this, in fact. Hiruzen's voice suddenly turned into a low whisper. I think Mito may have liked it this way. Naruto's eyes snapped up to Hiruzen's as the younger of the two continued. Mito had lost most of her family. Her grandson, son and husband had both died in war. She hadn't been to Uzushio in years. Tobirama had moved on to the next life from age, and Tsunade was all grown up. All that was left was Kushina, but she was placed into Minato's safe hands. Instead of having to wait another century before she could see them, your unintentional mistake allowed Mito to move on and see Hashirama again. We both know that, by itself, the illness and broken heart syndrome wouldn't have been enough to put Mito down. When Naruto looked ready to argue, Hiruzen spoke over him. I was there, Naruto. When Kushina announced that she was married, it was like a weight was taken off her shoulders, and I knew then that she had been holding on for her. With Kushina now taken care of, Mito was able to move on without regrets. Yes, it may be selfish of her, but no one on earth is perfect. There was silence in the forest for several minutes as Naruto processed what Hiruzen was saying. He didn't know if what the Sarutobi was saying was true. He hadn't seen Mito in decades. Naruto thought over what he had been told, from different angles and from Mito's perspective, and could find no fault in her actions. Yes, it had been selfish, thinking that she could simply let go as she had, but she was already dying if what Hiruzen said was true. Better to die with no regrets, than keep living simply for the sake of living. While Mito would leave a lot of people heartbroken at her passing, Naruto could only hope that they could move on, and leave Mito whatever piece she had found. Naruto turned back to Hiruzen, who was watching the ancestor of the Uzumaki and Hyuga with focused eyes. Naruto released a sigh as he pulled himself off of the tree and back onto 2 steady feet. Okay? Hiruzen asked. Yes, Naruto answered. I think I am. I don't completely agree with her choice, but she should be allowed her own peace. Good, Hiruzen told him. Now, if I am allowed to move our conversation away from such topics, I was wondering if you would like an update on your former pupils? Hiruzen asked, a bit of mirth in his eyes. Naruto could feel a groan coming on. He could feel that Jiraiya had done something stupid. In an underground cave, far away from Konoha, towards the north, 2 figures were stood before a large statue with multiple eyes. One of the figures was a plant-like man, half of his body white, the other black. A Venus flytrap-like extension protruded from his sides. The other figure was clad in a robe with a mask, only the right eye visible, showing a 3-tone Sharingan, marking them as a member of the Uchiha clan. We have to alter our plans slightly, the being with dual skin tone said. There are several things that Madara-sama did not tell you prior to his death because he believed them unnecessary. But we have found evidence to suggest otherwise. As such, the plans must be revised. Why? The masked man demanded. What could be so important that we would need to revise our entire plan? The elemental sage. The plant-like being said. The masked figure noticed that the dark half of his companion seemed to want to snarl but refrained from doing so. He is a threat to our plan. As such, it must be altered. The human of the 2 figures scoffed. What could he do? He would have to be almost 80 now. What threat could he pose? The masked man, while seemingly brushed off the possible threat of the legendary figure, knew that if there was anyone who could disrupt their plans, it would be him. Even years after he had been last seen, the stories of his power still had a long time to go before they faded. Perhaps the fact that not only does he not age, but he is currently occupying a home in Konoha. The dark half of the plant being seemed to come to forefront. You do not have the power to simply shrug off a threat like him, Obito. The sound of his name caused the masked man to snarl. My name is Madara Uchiha Zetsu, you would do well to remember it. And I am the real Madara's will, Obito. Madara-sama will not like his plans to fail because of your arrogance. Zetsu seemingly sneered. Obito thought about continuing their little verbal tirade but thought better of it. It would get them nowhere. Then how do you plan to deal with it, Zetsu? Obito asked, his anger restrained for now. Zetsu seemed to realize that arguing was pointless at the same time as his companion, and answered with as if the verbal exchange had never happened. The plans will have to be altered, it will take more time, but we should avoid the elemental sages. There it was again, the masked man noticed Zetsu's dark half trying to restrain a growl. Gaze. You seem to hold some hate for the elemental sage, Zetsu. Obito said lightly. Care to share? No, Zetsu replied shortly, before turning on his side as he got ready to leave. Just know that he is the one true threat to our plans. With that, Zetsu turned and left, not bothering to actually say how the plan would be changed. Well, Zetsu, Obito muttered to himself as he watched the manifestation of Madara's will walk away. It appears that there is more to you than I first thought.